Welcome to the Philosophy.EXE podcast, a podcast about how philosophy impacts everyday life, returning to the fundamentals of philosophy and not the high third, fourth order magnitude questions that are often talked about today.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me, my friend and my ally, who invited me here. He's the brains of the operation. I'm just the one that lives the very exciting, interesting life of a. I don't know. Well, you know what? I don't know what my philosophy is, but I think that's partially the reason why we're here.
Yeah, we've been friends for about 4 or 5 years now, and not only is Cameron great on camera, so he also is a very normal person, I would say. When I think of how people in society, I would like them to act like at a minimal level, you know what I mean? To have a positive society. He's kind of like the perfect target of does charity, cares about his community, but still wants to just live his own life and be left alone and to not have other people cause him problems. Does that sound about right?
That sounds exactly right. Like I care about my community, and I also don't want to see them at all. And it's like I want everyone to live a really happy, fulfilled life, and I want to do my part to help that exist. I also want to be left alone to do the same for me because I'm more of a hermit in general. Um, but I see like my community going very badly very quickly in a lot of different ways, and I'm like, all right, well, I want to see how to help that. So I'm trying to decide if I want to give directly to causes specifically, or if I wanted to do charity more of a foundation and let like a bigger umbrella kind of take care of it. um I'm still kind of trying to figure exactly out how I have right now. I have the money put into a pot, and I'm trying to decide how I want to allocate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I, on the other hand, I don't know how this really matters philosophically, but just for a little bit more personal context, I've dedicated my adult life to nonprofit work with either inner city disadvantaged people, or more recently, last couple years, my local county area within the CAP system. So I've always wanted to help people, and both me and Cam grew up rather poor with a lot of the ACEs, as they call it, which are basically adverse child experiences. Um, that is the new way that they say slightly abused.
Aces, but aces is a good thing. Like, bro, that's aces. Like, I think that's a positive slang word. I think.
It's like
I don't want to give the wrong idea. Like, I didn't want for stuff. Like, I was never like I would always get like a Game Boy, but a couple years late. When it was like on sale. So it wasn't like I never went hungry, and I never didn't have clothes or stuff like that. So I wasn't like broke, but that's because I had two houses, kind of, right? My dad had me part of the time, my mom had me the other part of the time. But yeah, I mean, like, SWAT team raided my house and cut open my bedding and my teddy bears looking for drugs that my mom was selling and stuff. So like, yeah, that was aces, you could say. There's stuff like that in there, but
yeah,
um
and
but
I
yeah.
would dare say that our generation, we're in our 30s, had a significant increase in the average amount of aces per child, right? Like it's just things started to kind of fall apart on a societal level somewhere between the 80s and the 90s in the 2000s, right? As far as like not really having everybody or even the norm being two parents in the same household, right? Um, both parents have to work, right? You don't really have stay-at-home moms anymore, etc. So there was a big shift in the culture, and of course, drugs got way more popular. Um, some other negative factors in, like, as you give freedom for expression of everything and the ability to do things, people will take advantage of those freedoms, and sometimes those hurt other people.
100%. Yeah, and like I've talked about, like kind of being a freedom absolutist in a lot of ways, and I really do fundamentally think I am. The only time I think I'm a little shaky on that idea is when children are involved, and like obviously when it impedes on someone else's freedom, right? It's like I want to kill this guy. It's like, well, he doesn't want to be killed, right? You don't get to trump that, all right? But like also when children are involved, like it might just be the responsibility. You might lose freedoms, like you might give up some freedoms once you have a child. Like that might just be something that has to happen for like a happy functioning society, not where it's not just anarchy. Because in a way, it is taking away their freedoms to an extent, but that's something I'm still kind of thinking about where I exactly lie. But outside of like that situation, I'm kind of like, let people do what they want, even if it's bad. Even if it's bad for society, I don't really care that much.
Yes, and we'll eventually get into more complicated things like that. I just kind of wanted to set the basis of like our backgrounds, but I would say as adults, regardless of the number of aces or any of those kind of things, we live very normal lives, etc. And now we're going to go into the episodic flow, right? So every episode will have roughly 10 questions that will be aimed from me towards Cam, and then we will have what they call uh, a dialogic conversation, right? Which is a really fancy way of saying we're both going to be honest in good faith and just say what we actually believe. Because even though there's dozens of philosophies that have written everything out for talking points about what you could say about a belief system, none of that matters unless it's what you actually think, right? So, what we're looking to explore much more is what do people actually think? How do people actually act? And what is the philosophy behind their actions? And is there a benefit, which I do believe so, but this is like an experiment, you know. Is there a benefit for people to look harder at their own philosophies and the reason they make decisions, to try to make sure that stands up to who they want to be, right? Because it's hard to be who you want to be if
Mhm.
you don't ever take the time to say, well, who am I actually being in, my decision making, etc.
100%. Well, like you see it all the time where it's like, yeah, this guy was a good man and a father and had went to work every day and did this. Like, I hope I could be that guy when I grow up. It's like, yeah, but if you don't even know where you're at and where you need to go to get there, in a sense. So it's like, what's the point of just daydreaming about it? I feel like you gotta take stock first. You gotta see where you're at.
And it used to be a lot easier, right? So society had traditional roles, right? So one of the negatives of traditional roles and a really hard structure is that it limits freedoms, right? But what it also does is it gives people an easy playbook to go through, right? So a specific religion or a specific like Western um, you know culture would allow you, right, I say that because we're in Western culture, would allow you to know what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a father, and you have these ideas about how you go about living out your life. The more we work away from the old systems into these new systems, we have less scaffolding and less essential help, right? To help an individual who might be a young man, and has no idea what they want to do with their life, and they're told all of these different things that are not compatible, right? You kind of got to carve out your own path, but in order to do so, you got to take that stock that you were talking about.
No, 100%. I mean, it just the simple question of that's not simple at all is like, what does it mean to be a man? Like, think about how the answer to that has evolved over time. Like, you can go back and look, like, I don't know, like Leave It to Beaver, right? It's like, here's a dad, he shows up for his family. He goes to work 9 to 5. The mom says his job is to provide, to punish children, and to be like a little bit to make the kids a little bit afraid of him, but still understand that he's there for them and he loves them, and to train them how to become good adults themselves. And now it's like some people, with the Andrew Tate and stuff, what it is to be a man is just to, have sex with as many girls as you can and drive the nicest car. Some people thinks being a man is like this and that. There's a lot of mixed messaging out there. And in some ways that's improvement because it kind of there is the issue with a rigid structure is it's not very good for people that don't fit into that because they're not everyone's going to fit into that, and it could be really hard to experiment to see if there is a better way to go. But part of an open system is like as things open, the wrong gets way more extreme. Even if there is a potential really really good path that is better to define, there's a lot more ways to screw it up. So I
Yeah.
think people still get better at that as they get older. I think the younger people really, really struggle with it without a little bit more structured guidance. But as you get older, you kind of just learn. There's not many people in their 30s and 40s that genuinely think Andrew Tate is like what a good idea of a man is, right? Like you just kind of learn for yourself a little bit through living life as well.
Yeah, but of course you have to learn by making mistakes, right? So in the old system,
Yes.
let's say 1950s America, right? Men were not going to end up driving the sports car and being Andrew Tate, right? Now that's something that you could spend your 20s doing to figure out that's actually not what I want at all, and that was a waste of my time, etc. Like now you might still have some good memories or whatever, but overall you're going to be like, that didn't move the needle towards what I personally wanted as an individual, because we don't see a ton of 40-year-olds that are actually trying to be Andrew Tate. um, I'm not saying there's none, right? So but it's definitely a lower percentage. So this kind of leads into an overarching philosophy that represents my channel, right? Which is the idea that there are infinite bad decisions, there are multiple good decisions, and within the good decisions, there are only trade-offs, right? And the way that you decide what trade-offs are the ones you want to make is really through that like self-accounting and understanding what you're doing versus what's happening in reality, because you have to create your own hierarchy as an individual, that tells you these are the trade-offs that I'm willing to make, and then these are the trade-offs that I actually don't want to make. Because when it comes to value systems, you have to create your own value system nowadays. You can't just stick to what culture gives you, because culture will give you 500 different value systems.
100%. Yeah, I mean, that just makes sense in general. That's why so many people are lost for like meaning in general. It's really easy to have meaning when you're raised from births telling you this is your exact role that you will fulfill. You are a success when you hit how, college or whatever, job, wife, kids, house. Like when you get that, then they will take care of you, as you get older. Like you have kind of have a whole entire game plan set out for you. It's really hard to feel lost when you're following through in that kind of way. Whereas now it's like you really do have to decide kind of what you want, which I think is good. Like it opens to a lot of sadness, but it also opens to a lot of potential, like more meaning. You could find your real meaning instead of what society says your meaning is.
Yes, and I guess the last thing that I'll say about this is that I do want to be firm that I think this is a overall good for humanity, right? To move from the 1950s and all of history's model, right, of every culture's kind of feeding you something and you don't really get much of a choice, to having more autonomy and more freedom. But we're going through this intermittent time where we're learning how to deal with all of this freedom and autonomy, and you still have to have some sort of system that exists to help you figure out what you actually want and value, and we haven't 100% figured that out yet. So as we continue to do that, I think philosophy is going to play a very large part in people figuring out exactly who they want to be and how they formulate that best version of them, because now you have the freedom to actually be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you just look, people used to ride horses around, right? And now everyone agrees cars are better for the world, transportation, everything. Maybe not the environment, I don't know. But for the most part, cars are seen as like a pretty objective improvement. But car crashes happen, right? Especially when people were figuring out, people were probably running into horses. There was all kinds of problems that they did not have before that caused all kinds of mischief. But like, and hopefully, like, self-driving cars is like another thing of this, right? Yes, there'll be some wrongful deaths that an AI screwed up and someone that shouldn't have died will die, but the amount of people that don't die will be so much higher. And it's like, I feel like, yeah, so this is good. This is better, but there's a transitional period where it's going to be really bad for some people while we sort out the kinks.
Yeah, and so I'm going to build off of your example with the horses, right? So when they first started getting cars, there were no traditional roads. The roads were
Hmm.
designed for horses, and horses are much smaller than cars and would, carve like one rut, right? You know how tires carve two ruts now. So
Hmm.
until they built the infrastructure for roads, driving a car was probably way more dangerous and difficult. And, you know, the equivalent of um, morally, emotionally, and developmentally, being able to develop roads for modern society to be able to get to all of these different endpoints that we now have opportunity for, instead of going through the forest with a machete, right? And you have no idea where you're really going until you get to a clearing, and then you're like, oh, this wasn't where I meant to go. That's how a lot of
Hmm.
modern development at least feels to me. That's how my teens and 20s felt.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm ready to kind of jump into our 10 questions because I feel like we could just go back and forth on examples because that's kind of what people that like to think about philosophy do anyway, right?
Fair
Like,
enough. All right. So, all right, to set the tone, right? Most people don't know what philosophy they're living. They're just making decisions and hope it works out. So, let me ask you something. When's the last time you did something that you knew wasn't good for you, but you did it anyway?
I've been really good all day. All right. I've been really good all day today, if I'm being honest. I would say something that I knew wasn't good for me, but I did it anyway, would be as far back as either yesterday or the day before yesterday. So I think yesterday is debatable. I don't remember exactly, but at max 2 days ago. And but I did it anyway. And the simple why is because it felt good, right? It felt good in the moment. I don't know if we want to know exactly what it is. I'm an open book, but I don't want to like bypass the point of the question.
No, I mean, an example would probably help, but I'm not going to force you to give, depending
Yeah,
on
yeah.
how personal the example is.
Simple, fast food. That's it. I could have easily I wasn't really supposed to eat. I'm on a diet, and on Saturdays I kind of don't really care about my diet. On Friday, I'm like, well, it's almost Saturday, and I didn't buy enough food at the grocery store for tonight. So instead of going to the grocery store, I was like, I'm just going to go to Jack in the Box or something. I know it costs more money and it's strictly unhealthy for me, and I loved it. It was fantastic. Um, I didn't even feel bad afterwards, like at all. But like I'm still like I know I shouldn't, but like it's one of those things where it's like I know I shouldn't, but I can, and it won't hurt me until I do that 30 times. It's like it will. It's a death by a thousand cuts type kind of thing. But um, so yeah, that is what I did. That is why I did it.
All right. And so when you did that, what prediction about the next day were you not making in this example? Now sometimes you do things to because you're predicting for the future. An example like this with like fast food, it's usually the opposite, right? Like the move that's good for the next day is eating something healthy, so maybe like things go smoothly through the body and we don't have any
Hmm.
issues and stuff, and we don't feel like trash. Um, but usually when I eat fast food the next day or that afternoon, I either have digestion issues or I just feel very lackadaisical and tired. Did you have any of those things?
Not really, because it was like midnight, 11 o'clock at night, midnight. So that's kind of what I look for. I'm like, I want to be groggy and tired and go to sleep. Most my issue is the give an inch, take a mile thing, where it's like, luckily it was at nighttime, but it's like, all right, well, I already ate something on Friday. It's Sunday, and I'm like, what? I could have one more meal on Sunday, right? Like, and I could easily start living his lifestyle very quickly. Like, it's always two steps away. It's one misstep and then me convincing myself one more step, and I'm like, well, this week's screwed. I might as well just keep going. Luckily, I'm way better at that now than I used to be. Like, I'm much better at sticking to it. So, um, now it's just a misstep. I don't take that second step and just go ham sandwich. I go turkey. All right, trying to keep the calories down. But yeah, I mean, really, when I wasn't really thinking about tomorrow. I'm just thinking about I'm hungry now and I'm lazy and I don't want to put an effort and I know I shouldn't and I know it's not a hard problem to solve. I have canned beans at home. I have top ramen at home, which would both save me money and is maybe not as objectively bad for me, although maybe not as good. But like I had stuff at home I could have eaten, but I'm like, yeah, but Jack in the Box tacos, man, those things are that's my addiction, truly. Like food is like an actual addiction for me. It's one of the only things where I think I compromise on who I want to be versus who I am. Like for the most part, I'm pretty good on being who I want to be. But food is a major Achilles heel because who I want to be is a person that eats fast food. What I don't want to be is a person that dies young. It's like so that's actually an internal struggle for sure.
No, and that's a really good example of like an internal struggle. And I want to be very clear. All of us do this, right? We're just giving an example of this. I'm a person who would like to still be in men's physique condition, and I'm not, right? So why am I not? Because I don't exercise enough, and I eat more unhealthy than I should. I still don't eat a ton of fast food, but I definitely we cook a lot of things that are heavy in calories, etc. You know what I mean? Um,
The
we had
pastas, I love
yes,
pasta's
the
so easy to
pastas.
make at home too.
We had nachos maybe last night or the night before, right? We make like a big bed of nachos and we throw it in the oven and it's delicious. And I shouldn't
And you
have
get
cheese.
convinced. It's like, hey, I don't eat out. We're eating at home. Like for me, that's like, oh, this must be healthy. I'm eating it at home. It's microwave burritos. It's like, no, it's not. I'm. that's why I don't even buy food that I like anymore. I just buy stuff that I have to eat. Like, mathematically, this fulfills the desired requirement. I take all emotion out of eating, being like, this is a biological necessity.
Yeah,
That's how I deal with it.
I have
Anyway.
also struggled, like, I also have, I mean, technically, I don't like the idea of calling it an addiction, but it really is an eating addiction or whatever, right? And the way that I was able to do men's physique and stuff is I just never bought food that was unhealthy, right? And then
Mhm.
my house only had healthy food and usually had very little food because I would just kind of buy day by day. And that was when I had just one child. As you go and you have more children, etc., now you're cooking meals for everybody. And the truth is, I'm not going to cook every single night and make a healthy meal and then deal with all the complaints of my children being like, why do we have to have broccoli and asparagus again? You know what I mean? Or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just no one can live their life that way 100% of the time, right? It's not realistic.
and I fell off the wagon hard after I stopped doing men's physique as I had more children, etc., and more responsibility. So now the issue I run into is there's nothing wrong with my kids having a snack. They're a kid, you know what I mean? I shouldn't be imposing these super strict rules on them because more than likely they're going to grow up and resent me for it, and more importantly, remember healthy food as a negative, right? A constraint, and then mess
Yeah.
things up there. So I try to allow them to have some balance. But by allowing them to have balance, that means there's unhealthy food in my house. That means there's a 48 count of little chip bags that they bring for their snack at school, right? And it's very easy for me just to grab one of those as I'm walking through the kitchen. And
And
those decisions
not even
compound.
that's 400 of invisible calories. I don't feel any more full after eating that. It's just like it's like I accidentally breathed in, the bag is gone.
Yeah.
So no, you're absolutely right. That would be tough. Like I the way I get myself to do things is I reframe everything. That if I really want to become successful at something, I have to reframe it in a way that I'm good at. I don't do things to become a better person. I don't do things that make me a worse person. Is kind of the way I frame it. So two examples are finances and food. I was in debt, not as much as most people are, but now like I'm financially secure and I'm losing weight and stuff like that. But I didn't say I'm not going to spend as much money. I would say I'm not going to go out and spend money. Like it's easy. I'm lazy. I don't want to go out and spend money for food. It's not that I am going to eat healthier. I'm going to make sure I eat healthier. It's like I'm not going to go out and get unhealthy food at the drive-through. I've got food here, right? So it's I always frame things like I'm lazy. I don't want to go do something, and that's how I get myself to do it. By I could be like, "Yeah, I'm saving myself time and effort. I'm just not going to go do that." And I think that learning that kind of way to motivate yourself, I'm not saying that works for everybody, but that works incredibly well for me. Instead of thinking I'm doing something, I think of it as I'm not doing something.
Yeah, I do think everyone has to kind of learn their own internal logic so that you can figure out the hacks for your internal logic, right? So it's like that's one of the hacks for
Mhm.
you is by framing it in that way. And it might not work for another person. You and me are generally kind of similar with that kind of stuff, so it's like I do that too. But I want to make it very clear. All of the reasons I gave you of why I don't eat healthy are all essentially excuses, right? The truth
Yeah.
at the very bottom is that I don't want to be healthy bad enough to stop doing the things that I'm doing, right? And that's okay, but there's repercussions for everything, right? So like, I may develop diabetes in the next 20 years because I never used to drink soda. But now that my significant other drinks soda, there's something that feels almost morally wrong to me, as horrible as it sounds, to sit there drinking water like I always used to while she enjoys a soda. I think, no, you know what? I enjoy a soda. I worked hard today. That's just a story I'm telling myself. It's all bullshit, right? Like the truth is,
Yeah.
she has a soda, and I say that gives me the excuse to have a soda.
100, and it's like such an obvious excuse. And it's like but we are no one is better at convincing ourselves of bullshit than ourselves. Like we can absolutely trick ourselves into anything. That's why I drink Pepsi Zero, right? Cuz like I have decided I will not ever be a person that does not drink soda. It's just not going to happen. So I have to drink one soda a day, and then I drink a zero sugar soda. And I'm like, but I can't. I will, if I swear off soda, I will relapse at some point, and I'll relapse in a worse way than if I'm just slow and steady wins the race, kind of thing. But like, yeah, with like, you don't want to be healthy bad enough, or you don't, I don't want financial security well enough. Like those are, I always call them guitar problems, where it's like my classic example is like, I really want to know how to play guitar. I've taken zero guitar lessons, right? I don't want to learn how to play the guitar. I want to know how to play the guitar, right? So it's like, how badly do you actually want to know how to play the guitar if you put in no effort for 20 years in learning how to play it, Like, I picked up a guitar once and I did it for a week, and I'm like, then I put it down. It's like, oh, so you didn't really like, there are people that they're obsessed. They want to, and they don't, it doesn't matter. They didn't have a guitar. They made it out of fish string and a stick, like they will find a way to make it happen. So, um, really, it does come down to a magnitude of want. Like, a think wanting something doesn't mean you want to do what it takes to achieve that thing.
And it's
Wanting
almost
to
like
be
I
something
would
doesn't mean you want to do something.
Yeah, and it's almost like I would define wanting something by being willing to do what it takes to get it, right? So,
Yeah.
I think we get confused. We think of the idea of the end goal, like you said, of knowing guitar, and we think, well, I want to know guitar. It's like, well, that's great, but that's impossible. That's not how it works. Until we get Neuralink and you can download how to play a guitar into your brain or whatever, it's like the reality is you have to do all of that practice, whatever they call it, the 1,000 hours or however long it takes you to learn the
Well,
guitar. And
we're gonna download Neuralink, and it's gonna be like 99 cents to learn guitar. I'm like, 99 cents, bro. Come on. Let me
and
know when it's on sale. I don't want to. I don't want to put on my credit card in a Neuralink. It's like there'll be some other excuse.
you're absolutely right. And it's like if history has shown us anything, right? I was watching the Joe Rogan Brett Weinstein episode recently, and they were talking about how Joe felt that if everybody had enough money, then it would kind of like solve almost all the problems, like all the crime, etc. And Brett's like, well, I mean, we have like 100 times the wealth of people from 400 years ago. So by their metric, we do have like, the poorest person that's not homeless, that's living on food stamps, has, that life from the standpoint of somebody 400 years ago. That's probably going to happen again and again over the future. It doesn't seem to actually solve all of the problems we think it would solve.
Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious that it doesn't. I mean, there are problems it will solve, but I don't even know how to describe it. But there are just people that just do things because they want to do things, not because they have to do things as well. You know, um, and I'm sure like there are. I'm sure more money would solve some problems, but there is like, I think government has shown there's a time where there's like throwing more and more money doesn't actually fix anything. Like, you have to change people on an individual level, I think, to actually make widespread changes. I mean, anything could happen. Like, the only reason our society is the way it is because we have people think the way they do, right? If every person woke up tomorrow and they decided, I don't know, that the most important thing in the world was escaping this planet and going to Mars, like, that shit would get done pretty damn fast. But it's like only 10 people care about that. So it's like, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I understand that point. I think obviously Joe's like, I think Joe has come into a lot of money and he just understands how much freedom it's given him to pursue everything he loves out of life. And it's easy to see why he would think everyone else would have that. But he's also been always, you don't get to that position after doing what he's done without being one of the most self motivated people in the world anyway, right? He's
Yeah.
always has his purpose, his meaning, and he's doing this stuff, and he's always working on himself. Like, he has his flaws, but he obviously cares about his well being, and he puts a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, so I've always looked at money as what money does is it makes you more of whatever you are, right? So it's like I also say the same thing about alcoholics, right? Like getting drunk just maximizes who you really are. So now some people put on a social face, so when they get drunk, you see and you're like, "Whoa, I never thought Dave was that kind of guy." But Dave was always that kind of guy. It's just now he doesn't have the restraint to be able to put on the mask anymore, right?
So
So the same
I was
thing.
afraid I'd be an angry drunk, and I wasn't at all. I was super nice. I was kept trying to get girls to kiss each other, honestly. Like, I was a little bit of that. But I mean, for the most part, like, I was more of a party guy, not an angry guy. So I do actually think that that stands true.
Yeah, me
But
too,
sorry for
right?
interrupting you. If you would.
So, like, I generally come off as a serious person during the day, you know what I mean, or whatever. Um,
Mhm.
and when I drink, I'm a silly. person. You know what I mean? So it's like the and I know truly like that is who I am underneath, but I have consistently tried to, you know, protect that silly boy, you know what I mean, from the realities of the world, etc. And when I do kind of let my guard down, etc., I am someone who loves to party and have fun and whatever. And that's not what people would expect. But that's why when you see somebody who's an angry drunk, my theory is that there's somebody who deep down is already angry, and then once you remove, all of that ability to hide it. So in this example that we were talking about, money kind of does the same thing, right? If you're a hardworking person who is, has all these great ideas of what you're going to do with that money, then you will do that, while other people might just buy bags and bags of heroin. You know what I mean?
100%. Like it's kind of a nerdy example, but I think of money as like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. It's like it's the One Ring's entire purpose is it's a force amplifier, right? So the strong put it on, they get stronger. That's why they give it to a hobbit, because they're so inherently weak that it has a very small effect on them, but it makes them invisible and stuff, right? So like it enhances them. But like you could put the ring on Sauron, you get the ultimate evil god. You put the ring with Samwise, and he becomes a brave, like larger than life warrior kind of thing that orcs are afraid of because he has such a intimidating presence. It's like it amplifies what you are, in 100%. I think everyone that's ever had money has noticed that. Some people become millionaires and they spend it all on drugs and prostitutes. Some people become millionaires and they could even be over the top. They give it all to their friends. They buy their friends' houses. They buy their friends' cars. They buy their parents' houses and cars, and then they're broke. Like there is a bad side to being too generous and stuff like that too. But yeah, it's just a force multiplier.
Yeah, and I love Tolkien. I love all of, like, I think the cool thing about the 1900s was we got a lot of writers who lived very different lives than we're really even capable of living today, right? Like people who went through World War One or World War Two and then would write these fictional novels. But I've always thought that, or at least as an adult, that there's not really anything, as there is no fiction, right? All there is people's internal views of the world and their views of other people, and they can turn that into a story, right? But we see the world as a story or as a narrative. So really, like when you have a professor like J.R. Tolkien, if I said his name right, but either way, he was a brilliant.
George R. Tolkien. Yeah.
There you go. And uh, when you have somebody brilliant like that and they're able to take their worldviews and all of that experience that he had and put it into a story, really what you end up getting is it's like a modern biblical story is what it ends up kind of being like, right? It's a meta story about how life is through the lens of that particular writer. And you get that same stuff with like Sanderson, with Dostoevsky. I can't pronounce anyone's names, but like there's a bunch of really great
You could read
writers
them though.
out
You
there.
you could see it and recognize it on a piece of paper, which is what's important. I mean, obviously, and Tolkien was a very religious, like Catholic man as well. So like it obviously shapes the worldview. And I believe like he even has in letters, like it's literally this is like an alternate reality of ours. But like if you go in the future a couple like 5,000 years, it's actually our just Earth, right? Um, like he would think Jesus would come back and kind of stuff in the Lord of the Rings, but like none of that stuff has happened yet, kind of thing. But so it's like that's not what's so good about Lord of the Rings. Like this is not a Lord of the Rings podcast, but it's like you could watch all of the Lord of the Rings and think Gandalf is just an old wizard. You don't need to be like, oh, he's a Maiar from sent by the Valar to defeat this, and he's actually immortal. Like you don't need to know any of this stuff. Like it's inherently, and like you said, like I'm not fully on there's no such thing as fiction like train in terms of the terminology and stuff because I'm still like thinking about it. But the whole idea is like, yes, that the story has so much immense truth in the characters and the development. And like, are there things in the story that don't make sense to an extent? I'm sure that there's things, especially like he doesn't really talk about the economy of how like the world works and stuff because that's not really what the focus was. But Aragorn is an archetype of a character, and Frodo and Bilbo. Like we may not know a Samwise, but we all know of a Samwise, or like what a Samwise would look like in our own lives. So I totally understand it from that perspective. And yeah, it's pretty much like a borderline perfect trilogy, I think, in human nature, but also just like an interesting story in general as well.
Yeah, and I think Harry Potter does the same kind of thing, right? And I'm not saying that
Mhm.
that everything that happens, there's not, there doesn't need to be a such thing as orcs. There is a such thing as people who seek destruction, right? So it's like, you know what I mean? If you look at it through like this meta lens, it's like there's very few things that don't represent reality. And of course, this is reality through one writer's vision, right? Or through multiple interpretations of that when you get like movies, etc. But uh that you're going to have things that don't make sense, but that's because you and me have ideas that don't make sense, right? So to other people, but everyone can only really put what they internally know on a page. You can't actually make anything up. Is kind of what I'm saying. When it comes to the relationships between characters, I don't think it's possible for you to write a relationship that you haven't seen or haven't experienced.
Yeah, it'd be weird. It's like if you had a relationship between two characters and then, you understand one of them cheats on the other or they're really deeply in love, all these different variations you can imagine. What you're not imagining is like there's this relationship, this guy turns into a dragon, this one turns into, this one puffs into the fourth dimension and then they recombobulate. Like what are you talking about? This isn't a story. This is just nonsense you're throwing at a page. So like just inherently stories are reflections of real life situations that we see and know, right? Not very few completely, like I don't think you could completely come up with an original
Yeah, and
concept because then no one would relate to it. It would have no power, right? Everyone would be like, "What the hell am I even reading about?"
yeah, that's the point. It's like you could technically do that, and I do think people do that. They just write bad stories, right? And you read the stories, and you look at the way the characters interact, and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't right. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
this is not what people do.
Yeah,
It's like people are still people, even when it's like, I mean, maybe that's what you're saying. It's like the people in Harry Potter aren't real people, but they're still people. So they should act like people would act in this situation. Given this, and this are true in their world, this is how these people would react. I would act like Neville. This guy would act like Ron. My sister would act like Harry. She's always been the hero. So yeah, those kinds of things are super important. It wouldn't make any sense to write a story that no one could relate to, because then what it does, you could write it but no one would buy it. That's all, I guess.
and this is where it gets really interesting because you can write characters that seemingly don't exist. You can write aliens. You can write, um, Star Trek. Who's the famous guy in Star Trek who's brilliant but has no emotion?
Oh, Spock.
Spock. So like Spock is a character where it's like that race doesn't exist. There is no one who has no emotion. Yet him and the Witcher both have no emotion, but yet both play out the way that real people play out when they have extreme trauma and low access to emotion, etc. Right? So it's like they still play out like humans, even if they're dragons, even if they're, a beyonder. It doesn't really matter what they are.
Yeah, or like they have blind spots. They're like, oh, here's like, I know a person that's a really logical person, but he's like, why is she crying when her mother died? She hadn't seen her in 3 years and said she hated her. It's like, because she didn't really hate her, you dumb shit. Like, it's like there's like these blind spots, and yeah, that we know people that are have silenced their own emotions. Whether or not they literally don't have them is separate. But yeah, I mean, I understand when you say it's like, oh, there is no such thing as truly fiction, but it's like, I guess it is kind of, to me, it's more like splitting hairs. I'm like, yeah, Spock doesn't exist yet, but a version of Spock does really exist, without the ears, kind of thing. So,
Yes,
um,
and exactly. And I will always kind of like I wish I didn't do this because like internally I like to think I'm a super logical person, but when things come out of my mouth and come through the natural filter of my being, I'm a super poetic like person, so I don't speak precisely to what I actually mean. I speak in the spirit of what that precise thing is, which is not a good thing, you know what I mean, when you're trying to communicate. But you
the
got me.
the filter of reality is such a piece of shit, bro. But it's there, and we all live through it. Like and everyone can understand this in 2 seconds. You can picture the Mona Lisa in your head. You can't draw it. It's like you can't. You can picture anything you want in your head perfectly, and you can't make your hand do the thing. When this reaches to the physical world, there's something in between it that is just, it's not translated one to one. And that's the same with like thoughts. You're thinking very logically, and then you speak in a way where suddenly you're like, oh, I was angrier about that than I realized, or I was this about that. So um, that's something that's like really hard because everyone knows this. another example without the writing. It's like, man, I'm gonna have the shower arguments. Like, yeah, I'm gonna yell. He's like, yeah, you piece of shit. You always treated me bad. You're like, but when it does not do that. It doesn't ever do that. 100% of the time, it doesn't do that. And so, yeah, the filter of getting from here out of here is just, it makes us all so much dumber. It's crazy how dumb we are in the real world comparatively to how smart we are inside of our own heads.
Yep. And I think that leads into like a thing that I see all the time, and I struggled with this in my youth, right? Is you always have access to your internal logical model, and when you speak, usually you don't really think about how you're actually saying things. You think about what you were meaning to say. So you have access to all
Hmm.
this hidden information from the other person, while the other person, they only get to give you what they actually said, and then they look more like an idiot than you do, even if you guys are equally being idiots, right? Because you have that hidden information, and they end up in the exact same position. So you have two people who are like, I can't believe this other idiot. You know what I mean? They make no sense.
Yeah, it, just communicating with humans is hard, which is something normal humans like us say. But it absolutely can be a. I mean, it's not like hard in a sense, but like that's why I think relationships with your significant other never fully get resolved in a way where it's like it's perfect in a sense that I love it, but I never communicate perfectly. Like I can communicate with any person on the street like very well, but when I talk to my girlfriend, she'll be like, "Why are you being so mean about, like, why are you saying it so mean?" I'm like, I was just trying to say exactly, like, I'm not trying to be, I have no intention of being mean to you at all because I care about you. I was just trying to say that it's whatever this thing. But and then I'll be like, "You're being a real jerk right now. Like you've said this in a very aggressive way." She's like, "All I was saying is something about the sock." It's like, "No, but you didn't say, would you pick up your socks? You said your socks are here again, or something, It's like, but she wasn't projecting a meanness thing. So
Yeah.
anyway, man, yeah, that's life. Life is imperfect. Just that's why arguments are so fruitless, especially when you're in the moment. You say something that's slightly off, she says something that's slightly off, and then you're going off the cuff and everything doesn't make any sense. You're just like, I don't even believe what I'm saying, but I'm angry. It's like, I hope your mother moves out.
Yeah,
And
that's one thing that I luckily like got good at earlier on. Um, because I've been in some unhealthy relationships with some very angry, loud women. Um, and some of them are the mothers of my children, and I had to learn to have restraint because I never realized how horrible thoughts I could have about someone I love, right? Like
mhm,
it's like, how could I think that if I actually love them? And the point is, they know all of your buttons, right? They know
mhm.
exactly how you feel about things and what your weaknesses are. So when they say something, and we're not going to give examples, but it just hits you so hard, you're like, I have to hit her harder, or at least
Yeah,
equal, and then it
I
escalates into these crazy things.
when I was in unhealthy relationships, I haven't done it in my relationship, but I used to just like think, I'm like, what's the, in case I ever need to, what's the meanest thing that I could say in two sentences that would destroy this person? And it'd be like, it's like, I know why your dad killed himself. I would too if I had to spend another hour with you or something. It's like something that would just be like absolutely destroy the person. And I did that for fun. I never said it, but I would think about these things. And I'm like, I thought it was just like having like fun being clever, but I haven't even thought about that in my relationship with like a healthy relationship. So people are psychopaths, all right? That's something that you shouldn't but I think that's part of Jim Carrey said as a comedian, it's like being sane is like your insanity is as close as saying yes to the wrong impulse. Like everyone has insane impulses, but we're all just like civilized normal people, so we say no to them and we're like, we brush it away. But like if you're just talking to your friend and you're like, I bet I could hit him in the face, he wouldn't even stop. He wouldn't even be able to stop it in time. And you just say yes to that, bam, you're like you're a psychopath, right? Like that close.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Is that Joker, Batman, right? Joker says everyone's only one bad day away from being me, right? So,
Hmm.
I think the important part is just to remember, in society and stuff, and in polite society, we like to pretend like we're not like that and the other people aren't like that because it makes us feel safer. But don't fool yourself. You know what I mean? Don't start acting like you actually are that high and mighty, because we all have these impulses and thoughts and whatever. And I think the more honest we are that it exists, the healthier that is, because then you can learn to understand and deal with other people when they're at their weakest better.
100%. I mean, it's like I had a teacher. He was like, maybe it's an extreme example, but that was kind of the point of the class. He's like, how many of you think that if you were in whatever early 1900s or late 1800s America, like you would be one of the ones helping, free the slaves or whatever? Or whatever. When I don't listen, this is how bad my history is. I don't even know when the fuck the slaves were freed. All right, but the idea is, how many of you think you would be people that would help
Yeah.
release? And everyone's like, oh, I would. Every single one of this classroom would have been one of the good ones. Yeah, fucking right, bro. Like you're just not thinking on who you are as a person. And I truly don't. I when I looked at myself, I was the only one in the class, and I told him, I was like, I don't think I would have been one of the good ones. I don't think I would have been racist, but I think I would have been far too afraid to go up against society in
Hmm.
that way. I don't think I'm the brave one that's willing to put their life on the line for a stranger, even if I know it's right. And like that was me in high school. Maybe I'm different now. I have reason to believe, like, when put into extreme situations, I am more animated than I thought I would be. But still, like, that kind of self reflection is so important to understand real human nature, because you can't fight against your bad nature if you don't even know what it is. It'll just sneak up on you and take over. Like it just, like, yeah, I get it. Every single person, a white person was evil. Every single Nazi was evil. It's like, literally no. It's obvious no.
Oh, what happened to the audio? You said that not every Nazi was evil, and now it just won't even let you speak.
Second, 1 second. There we
Oh,
go. All right.
he's back.
Yeah. It's just not every Nazi was evil. All right, just to clarify, but it's like, yeah, there were some that were afraid. There were some that were probably genuinely good people that were just like happened to be German in that time. They're like, I don't know, I'm just living in my village, growing my food, taking care of my family. Like, there's all kinds of people, and of course, there were very evil people, right? Duh.
Yes.
But I don't
Well,
know. The
and
point is, I think it's important to self-reflect and not always think, oh, I am the most moral, good person, and I would have been the hero of every story in all of history. You know?
yeah, and they have the Stanford thought experiments, right, where they took these like wealthy slash educated, a combination of both, right? However you get to Stanford, and they split the class in half, completely random. Like there's just the haves and the have-nots, right? And then these people get to control the other ones. It's Nazi prison guard, basically. And over the course of this experiment, the prison guards, even though it's completely fictional and only at school or whatever, or only in this environment, it's like they really started to treat the other people horribly, and they thought that they were justified to do so, even though they knew that this was all just a simulation. You know what I mean? Still fell for it.
And that's like, that's I don't blame those individuals. That whole point is, that's like, if you blame those individuals, you're missing the point.
Yes.
You were 150-50 away from being one of those individuals, right? In that situation. The whole point is to identify human nature and to identify yourself, and to the only way you're going to be able to combat that is if you're first aware. Awareness precedes everything, you know?
Yes, and that's why, like, when it comes to how philosophy like should be applied, in my opinion, right? It's like to reveal human nature and to help us come up with rules and strategies of dealing with the fact that this is human nature, right? The point is, it's very rare for the person who doesn't fall into that, you know, Stanford issue, and even when you're like, and they have these other studies that kind of show that like almost everybody didn't want to do it other than like one or two people, right? If they would say that on, like, you know, a sheet before they'd go in the room and just let the people be mean, but they were
Hmm.
scared to speak out because we have social conformities and, you know, these kind of, you know, socio systems that make it so you're like, well, I can't speak out against the group, and you assume everybody feels that way. So you can have 80% of people not want to do something, and then everybody is still doing it.
100%. I mean, that's just the power of, the flock, because the loud voices lead the way, and everyone's like, well, I don't want to be the one that they're yelling at. I don't want to be against that person. And then everyone's kind of it's so easy to be shuffled along, and I think you can see that in current society and just public, right? Like you see it there's all kinds of situations of like someone's like choking on the side of the street. People just walk past the person, like, oh, someone will get them, someone will save them, someone will save them, someone will call an ambulance for this person, someone will like it's always someone else's responsibility. I feel like, or you don't want to be the one that stands out. What if this guy then wants to? What I need to take care of this guy? Am I responsible if he doesn't work? If I walk past, I'm not responsible, but if I stop and something happens, then I'm responsible. So that's human nature, 100%. Luckily, people I think are getting better in some sense. As you get older, I think the people I know are better at acknowledging that about themselves. I don't know about the younger generation though. I suspect that they may not know that about themselves still, like what their actual human nature is.
Yes. Well, I also think the fact that we grew up pre-social media, right? It's like, how old were you when you got your first real social media? Not MySpace, because that was like not real social media, but it's like
Yeah,
Twitter kind of level. Like, how old were you?
yeah, maybe it might have been after high school. Like Twitter existed when I was in high school, um, but I didn't really get it, and then Facebook might have been yeah, I mean anywhere from 17 to 21 was kind of when it was like getting introduced. But I had a flip phone in high school, right? I didn't even have the internet on my phone in high school.
Yeah, and I'm a
So,
couple years older than you, surprisingly. No, I'm just kidding. But nonetheless, the iPhone came out my senior year of high school. Nobody could afford the first iPhone. You know what I mean? Like we
mhm,
forget how
same. Yeah, yeah,
expensive
yep.
and stuff that was. And then by iPhone 3, everyone had an iPhone.
Yeah. My grandma had an iPhone and I was like, "Whoa, around me? You mean you can just click this thing and there's a map around you that tells you where shit's at?" You're like, "Yeah, there's a gas station 2 blocks that way." And there is, it's like I was so amazed by the first iPhone. It was actually like now it's like no one's amazed by it anymore. Kids aren't even amazed. It's just such a normal thing. It's like I mean, like to be fair, like I was never shocked by telephones, right? I'm sure that was mind-boggling. My dad still does this. My dad will call me. He doesn't do it as much anymore, but he'd be like, Cameron, right now I'm driving and I'm talking to you. My phone's in the trunk. I'm on Bluetooth. I'm like, okay, Dad, I get it. I know. He's like, yeah, but I'm not. I don't. The phone's not even near my head. It's in the trunk right now, and I'm still talking to you. I talked to this thing on my ear, and it called you, and now we're talking. And I'm like, I hit two on the microwave, and it microwaved my. Now my food's hot. It's like the same thing. It kind of energy to me, where it's like, I get this. This is not new to me, but that is a really fun thing to think about.
Yeah, it is super
Which
sad
is
though, isn't it?
that's an
Like
aside.
because all of our technological advancements are probably like the last 200 years or whatever for the most part, like the really large ones.
Hmm.
And everybody up until rather recently um kind of got them slowly dripped in so that each generation got to enjoy things. And now we're going from you and me were in the generation that had VCRs, and then we had floppy disks, and then we had CDs, and then we had iPhones, and then we had social media, and then we had OnlyFans. Like now we're having self-driving cars. What the hell is going? There's too much all at once.
I mean, we're in our 30s.
Yes.
We're in our 30s. When I was a kid, I remember being frustrated when someone forgot to rewind the VHS. I remember that very clearly. I remember going to Blockbuster Video and being like, "This is bullshit. I gotta now. I don't. I have to close my eyes so I don't accidentally spoil the movie." It's like because it would play on the screen just in reverse, and I'm like, and this one, Jesus goes back into the tomb, or whatever. I don't know. Passion of the Christ was on VHS, but the whole point is like and now AI is going to take every artist's job, and I know you're an accountant, but accounting, numbers, anything that doesn't need a physical body, AI is trying to take, and then the physical body is just robotics waiting to catch up, basically. AI will get smart enough where it solves robotics, and then it'll be everything, right? Then janitors will be gone too. Um, so that's crazy. This is over. I'm 33 years old right now.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. In fact, I've been with dating my girlfriend long enough where there was online dating that's been around for a while, but it wasn't like it was still the weird thing. You're like, oh, you're doing something online, like oh, you're gonna go find an online dating. Now it's like I couldn't imagine trying to meet someone with like some swiping thing based off pure physical attraction or some blurb about them. Like
Wait,
I do not envy
did
children
you
today.
meet your significant other on like Match.com, like the really old dating apps?
No, no, no. We went to high school together.
Oh, okay.
Like
I don't know why that's what I thought the
the way
implication
everyone's
was.
supposed to meet. I've dated a long distance girlfriend for 2 years that I met online. She was like in Connecticut. I was here, and we dated for like 2 years. And I was like, was it real? Was it not real? It depends on what people's definition was. I went and visited her, so we had a real physical interaction. But still, that was just a couple years. This is like a real relationship, 11 years long, and that was in high school is when we met. Um, but that's how people always meet. It's like how many people meet people in high school or at their job or in some local communal place where they go on a week, right? Now it feels like everything is, I don't know, left, right, left, right.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
God I don't have to engage with that world. I'm so fucking happy that I barely escaped that world. Like 2 years later, I would have been on the online dating stuff.
yes, I started in the real world, and then by the time my first relationship with my oldest mother ended, that was the norm. And then I did that, and I was like, "This is horrible. Like, I'm never gonna get in a meaningful relationship just because like I'm swiping the wrong people. I'm not even reading their profiles. Like, it's just bad,
Yeah,
a bad system."
it has bad incentives as well, right?
Yep.
It's not trying to gauge long term, compatibility.
Well, the
In
other thing
theory, you're
is,
like, oh, look at it, you get so many more people, but now you would never feel like you need to settle. People are always looking for everything to be perfect.
yes.
Everything lines up perfect. There's no such thing as any trials to get to people growing to become, growing together. So
And that's, I
that's
think, why
rough.
divorces are so high, right? Because everybody just expects you're gonna find somebody with everything. It's like, well, do you have everything? Are you the perfect person? Because I'm not. Like,
Uh,
I have a million flaws, and I'm a very difficult person to live with and put up with. So I need to give some grace to my partner in the same way.
100%. Like I know my flaws pretty well, and I know my girlfriend's flaws, and I know her flaws very well. No, but we just work together. Our flaws work together. Her flaws don't bother me that much. My flaws do bother her, but she lets them slide. That's just kind of the way it works. I can't explain it. I'll just leave a piece of garbage on the ground. I'll just be like I'll eat something and I'll like throw it on the ground. She's like, why not just throw it in the trash? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not in the room with the trash can right now. She's like, oh my God, just pick it up and throw it away. I'm like, fine, fine. Is this what you wanted? It's like, yeah, it's that easy. I don't know why I'm such a baby about it, but I just know that I am.
Yep. The last thing I wanted to bring up is because people can't tell this from the cameras, but we are two very different heights. I am much taller than you. No, I'm just kidding. Um, so I think Cam's like 6'4", right? So, and I'm
Hmm.
5'9". So what I didn't realize when I stepped into that dating world is that you and me get completely different people to get matched up with because there's a height filter. So I'm right at the top of, like, some girls will pick 5'10" at 6 foot, and some of them pick 5'9". You know what I mean? So like there's I'm sure there's some girls who even go lower if they're just nice girls, but you get the idea. Is probably half of the women are not even seeing me on their options because of my height versus you.
I did not know there was a height filter. I mean, that feels bad. I'm trying to think of and I don't want to be offensive to anyone, but I'm trying to think how is a height filter different than like a cup size filter?
Or a
It's
weight
like
filter. It's not,
or
right?
a weight filter, right? It feels like a weird metric to try to base a meaningful relationship off of. But I mean, I don't look at. Luckily, I'm not in that world. I would say that feels like a step backwards. That feels like I mean, what other kind of you can imagine 100 filters that I guess either go all the way or just remove that, right? The height filter feels like a weird misstep.
I think it's just because it was
I understand
requested
people.
so much, right? Because so many women would go into the real world after not really paying attention to the number, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's 5'8". I could never date a 5'8" person," and that also feels really bad for the guy, right? So it's like, because I've been that guy before. I've gone on a date with a beautiful woman who thought I was very attractive, and then it turned out she was an inch taller than me, and she's like, "I could never do this," and I'm like, "That I understand, but I really wish I
there
didn't show up here just to hear that."
there that must be there must be some evolutionary thing. I can't imagine caring about a girl. If a girl's taller than me, I don't give a shit, right? But
That doesn't happen.
there's
That's
clearly
why you don't
a
care.
mis there's yeah, it's never happened. But I can't imagine actually caring about height that much. It doesn't affect attractiveness. It doesn't affect. I don't know. It's something that I'm sure I have my shallow thing, right? It's
Yeah.
like I like girls with big butts. Like, why don't you like a girl with a small butt? It's like because I like big butts. You know, it's like whatever. Why do you like a tall guy? Because I like tall guys. You know, it's just one of those things, I guess. But that was something I would never even have thought of, like a height filter. That's
Yeah.
insight.
And well, I think in the insight is you're a tall person, so it never has to be. It never really comes up. But like when you're a short person, you experience those things. You know what I mean? And and you're right. It is a biological thing. People can look it up if they don't believe us. But women, feel safer with a larger man, etc. And
Like,
that's
my
why
girlfriend
that's
says she
false.
likes that I'm tall.
Yeah.
So I'll ask her, like, do you care that I'm tall? She's like, I don't care that you're tall, but I like that you're tall.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
happier that you are tall, but if you were short, I would still date you because I love you. And she would have given me that chance because she's just that kind of because she actually did not want to date me at all because I'm her brother's best friend,
Oh.
right? So she was like, there was a huge hurdle to get over there, but she was like, I fucking like him. I remember she said something like that. She's like, I can't believe I like Cameron Gilbert. Like she was mad. But anyway, yeah, I'm
No,
6'4" though. I'm tall. Not to brag.
not to.
How's the weather down there?
It's a lot colder, honestly. But
I know.
uh, yeah, it's a very interesting part of it's in online. It becomes something you can just toggle. In real life, I think most women are perfectly willing. Like once they meet you, if they think you're attractive and they like you, but they don't want to build you up to be something you're not, right? Because if they're just talking to you
Mhm.
online, then they make up this idea in their head of who you are, and they always make me 6 foot in their head. And then I'm never 6 foot, right? So it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
that
you're just not trying hard enough. You know,
if you
maybe
would
if you
just
work
try
on
really
yourself a
hard.
little bit, you could be 6 foot one day. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like,
got to build those calf
but
muscles.
what are you gonna do with genetics, right? I'm actually the tallest person in my biological family that I know of, right? So it's like
Yeah,
I lucked out as far as those genes go. It's just we're a bunch of dwarves. Like, what are you gonna do?
yeah. I'll be honest. If you have a girlfriend, being 6'4" sucks because you've already got the girl, and now you just have back pain for your whole life because you're too tall. Like, thank God I'm not like 6'6" or 6'8", but at least people would like look twice. I'm not tall enough where anyone looks twice. There's no double takes. Everyone's just like, wow, you're tall. And I'm like, yeah, but I have none of the good sides of being really tall and none of the benefits of being short enough where my spine has the right amount of vertebrae in the right spot. It's like, it's just like, I'm always just like, man, my lower back. I got to pay attention to my posture because when I hunch over, it's like a 90-degree thing because of all the travel space it travels. Being tall sucks. I don't like it.
T- tell
Six
me
foot is
more
good.
about
Above
the
6 foot,
problems with your privilege. How
you've
hard is it
probably
being white?
listen.
Like,
This is how's this philosophy? All right, you've probably slept with more girls than I have. All right, Mister Disadvantaged. All right, you can overcome these odds. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, they're definitely overcomable for sure. I just thought it was a
Yeah,
very interesting part of the online dating experience that I could understand. I was also fortunate that I was doing men's physique at the time, so that really helped like make up. Even if I saw half as many women as you would have, at least I could convert with some of them. While nowadays, if you're like in the bottom 40% of men, you just no one ever messages you other than OnlyFans girls.
if I put myself at 6'4", I wonder how many hits I would get just for being 6'4" with nothing else.
That would be a really fun thing to do is just have a blank profile, have you be 6'4", take a picture of you in a frame where they can't really tell you're 6'4", but like, yeah, that'd be interesting.
I have long, beautiful gray hair. I look like Thor. I'm basically Chris Hemsworth,
Yeah, you
give or
basically
take.
are. All right, so we've made it to question two. So we'll go ahead and do question two. We're probably only getting through three questions today. Um, we're
Okay.
still learning how we're gonna do this, but um, the next topic is about what people really want. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering, do you think people actually know what they want, or do they mostly just try to avoid whatever hurts them in the moment?
I think it's very much modular over the course of your life. Um, I'm pretty confident to 90%. not probably 98% of people over 60 have a better idea of what they really want than the average person, 30 and under. I think it's learned, right? It's kind of it's a meme essentially. When I say meme, I mean it in the unintelligent way of like a joke, not like the Richard Dawkins way. Which I understand that two peas in a pod, I guess, in a sense. But the idea is like guys get older and they're like, listen, don't waste your time just chasing after girls. It doesn't mean anything. It's just bodily. Yeah, it feels good, but you feel empty. Or what you really want is a girl that loves you and a family. Like guys really, really. I can't speak for women, but I think women probably do better at this too. But guys really hone in on what really matters to them as they get older. And young guys are so far off base, like what they think they want, at least in today's society. And I mean, even me, I remember lying about the kind of music I liked in elementary school because I thought it's what other people wanted to hear me say. I'd be like, I like rap music. Rap music is my favorite type of music because I was too afraid to not be the kid in class that liked rap music. And now I was like, who gives a shit? I don't care what people think about me. I care about being true to myself. And, I was like, what do you want out of a partner? I want a really, really hot girl. Is like, okay, like that's like literally 13th on the list of like, is physical attractiveness is actually not even in the top five for me because it's like I want peace of mind like so much more and I want to live a happy life. So I think people do what they want or know what they want the older they get. Maybe they never fully get there. Maybe they're always like a step removed where they still think they know. They're like, what I want is a family, but when they really want is like to be loved kind of thing. Like maybe they still are not quite all the way there and what they actually want, but they get way closer.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different developmental theories, right? You have like Maslow's and like Piaget's and all these kind of ideas and like Jung's shadow integration and stuff. But I do think you're onto it. Like, right, you develop over time, and that helps you reorganize your hierarchy of what you desire. And as you try things, you get to re-rank them, right? Because you remember being like 13 or however old you were before you had intercourse, right? And how high
Hmm.
was that on your imaginary list of most important things in the entirety of your life, right? That might have been one or two, right? It was for me. And then
Yeah,
when you're
it,
in
it
your
was it
20s,
was like the thing, bro. You're fucking a girl, and she's like there. I don't even know if she was there in my fantasies. It was more about me doing the act than it was a
mhm,
girl liking me doing the act kind of thing. It was, yeah. It's so bastardized of like what is reality when in a young kid's mind. It's like it's so important. It's the holy grail. It's like oh,
yeah.
that's
And
why 40-year-old virgins get like fucked up. It's like because it's still there. They just pretend it's not.
that's got to be super hard. I mean, I have no idea what it's like to be like that, but you got to experience things so that it helps you understand, oh, it wasn't actually as important as I thought, right? And it might be the first year you start doing it, right, in the sexual example, but when you're 10 years in, all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I was completely off base with how important that was, right? Because now it's not something that's inaccessible. Like in your mind, when I was 13, I was like, I may never have intercourse with a woman. I can't even get a girl to look at me in the eyes.
100%. I genuinely thought I was like, I'm gonna be the 40-year-old virgin. I can't. I would be like, I can't picture the path that leads to me having sex with a girl. I just couldn't imagine it. I was like, I don't know what I say. Who do I do? There's a girl there. Someone else has to be a willing recipient. That's the hard part. I'm a willing recipient. It's the other half of the equation that's literally impossible. So I remember thinking that very clearly. I'm like, I'll be the 40-year-old virgin, and everyone will laugh at me. Uh, and I was like, I still don't like. It's hard for me to know how much I cared fully. I don't know. I think I cared a lot, but it's like a distant memory now almost. Like
Hmm.
it's a shadow, it's like an old version of myself. Like I don't even think sex is more important than sleeping in. Like I would rather sleep in than have sex almost every single time because I don't get to sleep in that much. That is not always accessible, right? But sex is like essentially I don't want to say anytime I want, whatever. But the point is it's on tap, and sleeping in is not. So just the worldview, it flips upside down.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's important for people to try things, especially things they're interested in, right? So the longer you put off trying something, the less likely you are to ever actually try it. And that means you're going to have this dream of this idea that is almost always just going to be overinflated in your head, right? Just the same way the sex was, the same way whatever other things that you really thought were cool, you know? I thought it'd be really cool to be in a band until I got on stage and we utterly just failed, right? You know what I mean? It's super embarrassing. But in my head, we were going to just kill it. We were going to be System of a Down up there, you know, whatever it was. Um, and you end up getting those people who have midlife crises because they still have this dream of this thing that they never got to experience and they don't understand the actual value of that thing.
It's I mean, it might be a good time to loop around what we talked about a little bit earlier, but it's like it's literally when fantasy reaches reality, like things do not go according to plan. You know, whether it's trying to draw the Mona Lisa or it's like literally, I've thought my whole life I wanted to be a content creator, I wanted to be a streamer, and then I'm like, I hate this. There's no one watching. It's not very fun. I can't watch the streams that I want to watch when I'm doing it. You know, so like some people like me do it every day for 10 years because they actually really really want to, and some people bounce right off. They're like, I don't really want to that much, you know. So in fantasy, I don't know about the fantasy is probably a good word, but still it's like just like when you have things going on in here, you know, you're thinking about how things will be but you don't experience it. It just gets bigger and bigger into this thing. And then the second it hits reality, it's everyone knows this in so many examples, but it's hard to apply it to examples you haven't experienced yourself, even if you know it's probably, you probably are so off by a magnitude. You're like, I know I won't be famous the first time I get on stage and do it. And, you know, I know it's, we're not going to be the best band of all time, right? It's our first show, but like the magnitude of like people booing you, people like being upset that you're there, like you're ruining my evening with this shit, you know? You're like, oh my God, so when your thoughts hit reality, it really is that's the best teacher, 100%. So you should
And
experience things you want to because you may actually hate them, you know, like
yeah,
genuinely.
exactly. And s- by proxy, it eliminates, right? It like creates guardrails around who do I want to be, what do I want to do, right? When you've tried nothing, there's just 360 degrees, you know what I mean, that you could go in. And as you start eliminating some of those options, you're like, nope, actually, it turns out I'm not good on stage. It turns out that I panic, and then I just freeze up, and I'm B rabbit, you know what I mean? So
It it for me, a great example would be like cooking, you know? It's like, oh, you watch all these cooking shows and all these people making all these things. It doesn't have to be, you know, 30-minute meals back in the day. But like now it's like there's all these YouTubers, like, look at this, you know, fancy Asian zing chicken wing with the bolognese and stuff. And I'm like, this sounds fun. I want to do this. I'll buy the ingredients. And then I get as far as like chopping the ingredients. I'm like, fuck this. This sucks. I have to get a cutting board and I'm chopping this. Like I was hungry 20 minutes ago and I'm only halfway done. I'm not doing this. Like I realize how much I hate cooking. Like I really, really hate like I don't mind doing a quick little meal, you know, making some chili. I could put some beans in a pot, boil it with some tomatoes. Like I can make like a chili and stuff, but like a slightly fancy dish, I'm like, this is I hate this. And I always thought how much I would love it because of how good it would taste and how cool good it would look. And then I realized it touches reality, and I'm like, no way, man. Never again am I going to put in this much effort into this kind of meal.
and then for somebody who's much more high in like nurturing, right, that's might be how they show love, right? And so they're chopping
A
up
hundred
everything, and
percent.
they're not thinking about how much work it is doing it like you and me are, because I hate cooking too. But they're thinking about how good it's going to, how much it's going to make their partner happy or their children happy, etc., right? And it's just very interesting how different people's priorities end up playing out in life.
100%. And yeah, the experiences are important. Just to kind of finish what you were saying, like I don't really think about it that much because I don't experience that much. I think I've experienced most of the things I think I'm interested in. I don't know if I'm that interested in that many things other than like I'm like, oh, I want to learn Japanese. I'm like, yeah, but I go to one class, I start, I'm like, I don't know anything. Like, but for the most part, yeah, people shouldn't fantasize about stuff. They should try some stuff out and then realize. Then when rubber hits the road, you will know very quickly if this is something you really are passionate about, or if it's something that you are just. This is not what I thought it would be.
Yep. And the example we gave about, you know, dreaming I'm going to go on stage and I'm just going to do good, right? It doesn't even need to be extremely good, but people are going to be like, yeah, good job. And then getting booed off stage because I completely stopped playing after they started booing. That's prediction error, right? So when you predict that something is going to happen and then you actually try it, the difference between fantasy and reality, when it's um, when it's a big difference, causes you to feel a lot of different emotions, right? And the the longer you push off experiencing that, the worse it's going to be. Because if you do that at 20 years old, like I did, well, I at least got to learn that, you know what, I'm never really going to be in a band or be famous or any of those kind of things. I don't have the social proclivities for it. But if you're 40 and you're going through a midlife crisis, you still believe that about yourself because you haven't actually resolved that prediction error yet.
Yeah, and it's kind of in a similar boat, but like I always think of it as a perpetual preparedness, like perpetual preparing. It's like I think of this in the content creator space because people are always like, yeah, I'm about to start a channel on this thing, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while, but I got to get the camera right, and then I want to make sure all my scenes are perfect and the editing is perfect, the sound is perfect, and then I'll do this, and it's like they'll spend years not doing the thing, kind of preparing to do the thing, and it's like there's always a there's always an excuse to not do that thing because you're not quite ready yet. But there's a time where it's like, if you're writing a book, you got to write the words. You can't just keep theorizing about what the whole idea of the book is. So eventually, you got to write chapter one. It's so just I think preparing is good, but people get preparation paralysis about that stuff, and it really holds them back from actually doing stuff. And I know this because I've talked to maybe hundreds of people that want to start making YouTube videos for whatever thing. And I'm like, just no matter how much effort you put in, no matter how much preparation you do, you are going to be you are going to look back in a year, 5 years, and think this was dog shit. No matter how good it is, you are going to be very not proud of what you produce because you have no experience. Um, and that's probably the same with like the first draft of a book versus the second draft also, right? Like you're just like, what the hell was I thinking when I wrote that? This is such a weird way to write that and things like that. So that's not exactly what we were talking about, but it was something that it definitely kind of struck me in a similar kind of issue people deal with.
Yeah, I actually really like that perpetual preparedness idea. And you're right, there's an infinite amount of excuses out there. And we're narrative beings. We can make up a story to convince ourselves at any time you really want, right? You can fall for your own bullshit. You'll probably know deep down that it's bullshit, but it doesn't matter if like all that matters is what you end up doing as an action, right?
Hmm. Yeah, like I'm not gonna go get fast food tonight, but if I want to, I'm like, it's like I bought all my food from Walmart this week, but I didn't buy anything for dinner because my girlfriend, I thought she'd be here to eat dinner with me because she had something, but now she's not here. So what am I gonna eat into my next week's meals now? And then I'm out of food at the end of the week. So, I'm just gonna go to McDonald's really quick and then I'll have no problems. It's like I could easily come up with this. And I know it's like bullshit because I have some canned beans, like I could get through the night. I could just not eat tonight. Am I starving to death? I'm 280 pounds, bro. I'm not starving to death. Like it's so easy to create bullshit that you just eat up because you're really good at manipulating yourself. you know, uh, the trick is to manipulate yourself in the positive direction, which is possible. I could do that when I work out and I run, where I'm like, just one more lap, and I'm like, yeah, come on, I'm not gonna stop running on an odd number of laps. That's weird. I got to go to an even number of laps. Like that kind of stuff. You got to always trick yourself in a good way. Use
Yeah.
that power for good.
Well, the reality is we are always tricking ourselves. The question is just, are we doing it with a purpose or a direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, that story example, I think you nailed as well. So I am trying to write my first nonfiction book because writing, I have it backwards of a fiction book. I'm really good at writing nonfiction because it's kind of just plain and boring and very autistic. But if you're going to write a story and have people actually say things that are interesting, my first draft was so unbelievably bad that it probably looked like a sixth grader wrote it. And I've gone through probably 8 revisions at this point, but I just wanted to bring up the fact that that's such a good analogy on your part, where it's like the first time all I really did was storyboard, but I just had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, and again, when rubber hits the road, you eventually have to write chapter one. You could theorize as much as you want. This character is going to have this complex personality. He's going to have this archetype, and this may not be necessarily noticeable until the second book when he really comes full circle. but he's going to go through the world in this way. But it's like until you actually start writing it, and no matter what you write, it's going to be bad. Not maybe not bad, but you are going to perceive it as bad when you look back at it as you get experience. And then maybe that's much less of a problem 5 years in. Like you could usually write stuff and get it pretty darn close the first time. But when you're going from zero to being a writer or zero to being a content creator, it's you will be embarrassed on your own behalf a lot of the time. Um, and yeah, I've dealt with too many people, not too many, but like where I don't know if it's excuses or like they really think they want to do something, and the second they start putting in the effort, they're like, you know what, never mind, this wasn't good. Or they'll just sit there and they'll be like, I got to get the camera. Well, I should I get the $200 camera or the $150 camera? This will make everything. This will make all the difference in the world if my video is good. Like, no, it won't. You don't have the skills for it to matter. You know.
Yeah. No, and to bring that kind of like full circle, right? Um, there's always excuses there, right? And you either do it or you don't. So I really, I'm glad that I started writing, even though I wasn't good at it. I might not even be good at it now, you know what I mean? But I'm learning and I'm growing, and the fact that I actually sat down to write chapter one is all that mattered, right? I wrote it and then I just kept going. And you started 10 years ago doing content creation, and then eventually you became successful at it, and you have, I don't even know how many subscribers now. I would guess 17,000.
It's I think it's 21,000 now, but
21,000.
still pretty. It's 20 or 21. I didn't look recently, but it's one of those two.
No, that's great.
But yeah, also when you the second you started writing, maybe not the second, but within a week or 2 weeks of you writing, you've got so much more education on yourself in a lot of ways, but especially on if you actually want to do this thing.
Hmm.
Like you got to figure out like, is this something I really want to do? Especially when you go back and reflect on that first thing that you did and you see what it looked like, and you're like, do I want to put in the effort to really redo all this and make this all good and put in like you get so much you get a crash course in self when in yourself. You get a crash course in learning about yourself when you do something for the first time, which I think is super valuable.
Yes.
Obviously it just is valuable.
So now I'm, when it comes to the guitar example, I think I will be able to someday play guitar. You know what I mean? When it comes to writing,
Hmm.
it's just a matter of how long it's going to take.
Exactly. Well, because it starts like now you're taking the lessons and you're like, you know what? Some people take the lessons and they're like, I don't like that my fingers hurt. This and it sounds like shit. I don't want to do it. And some people are like, oh, cool, look at this is a sign of progress. This is an act of whatever. This is like a trial that all guitarists go through. They get their calluses on their fingers. This is awesome, you know. So you just learn what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, it is very scary when you have a new skill and then you uh like in writing, and there's lots of things probably like this, like content creation obviously would be like this, and you give someone you don't know, like on a Reddit or a site or whatever, your chapter, and you're like, Please read this," you know what I mean? That's scary. It's so terrifying to get, to give your ideas. And it's got to be the same way when you put your videos out and then you get the comments and you're like, "Oh boy, how are the comments going to go?" Early on.
Yeah, 100%. Because I'm like, I still don't want my people I know. Like, yeah, my brother's like, yeah, we watch your videos sometimes. Our kids love you, and I'm like, oh shit, don't watch me, please. Come on. You don't even know. You don't even play the games. You're just looking. You're just listening to me for me, which is the only reason I don't want people to watch me. Like that never fully goes away when you really care about a person. And I think it's good to frame it not as an anxiety, but as kind of excitement because you care. You care about what that person thinks about you, and you care about how they perceive what you're doing. So that's a healthy thing to feel. You don't want to feel about constantly forever about random strangers on the internet. Like you will build up an immunity to that once you get more self confidence in yourself um, on those topics. But there's no doubt, even the first time you put out a video, you're like, someone's like dog shit. You're like, oh no, they're right. Oh no. But why? More context, please. More context.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I was going to do our third question, but now I think you brought me into an area where I want to ask this instead, to kind of explore the idea of, we hit a couple times on the theme of caring about what other people think that are strangers and not caring, right? So it's like when we were young, and specifically in the examples of when we were talking about in high school, we were very worried about what other people thought about us. And I was wondering, in your life, when did that hit, and how long did it take before, between like when you started to truly engage with other people's opinions of you or your work, and when you felt, all right, like their opinion doesn't really matter one way or the other meaningfully.
I'm trying to think. I think I was convinced. I think I convinced myself in about midway through high school that I didn't care what people thought, but that's not true. It was like maybe true on a surface level. Like, I was confident that I was funny, right? I could make my friends laugh, and I was confident in that. But there is kind of an interesting thing where you reflect back. I'm like, I wouldn't have wanted people to know. I don't know. There's a lot of things I wouldn't have wanted people to know about me, I suppose. So I'm like, I do care what people think to an extent, right? Um, but like when that kind of really, I wonder when that really kind of stopped being a thing. It's so gradual. Just living life in general and developing relationships with people that like you is the big one. Like the most confident I've every time I've leveled up my confidence, it's been because of friendships or relationships. Because it's like this is like I'm not really a fake person. It's like, hey, I'm a little bit of a weirdo, and this person likes me for who I am, despite my flaws. And now it's not just one person, now it's two people, now it's 10 people, and now it's my girlfriend, the person I actually care about. They like me for who I am as an individual. And so if someone doesn't like me, that doesn't really rattle my cage. I'm like, yeah, but look at all these people that do. Like I think that's kind of where I don't know if that's exactly the direction your question was aiming, but I think as I've developed more relationships with people, that's what kind of that's what made me care less and less about what the outside world thinks about. I'm okay being weird now. In fact, almost every person I've had any kind of significant relationship with, be it friend or significant other, has at some point been like, you're a little weird. Like they've actually said the words I am weird to me in some context. And like I never really took it as an insult, but now I take it as like a compliment. I'm like, you've not met a person quite like me, thank you.
No,
So
that's excellent. Yes. So you hit on some different beats than I was even thinking about, but it still rings true to me, right? So having healthy, dependable relationships for people who genuinely know who you are. One of the issues I had in high school is I was very performative, right? So most people didn't get the opportunity to know who I was, other than maybe my very closest two or three friends, right? And then the discrepancy between who
mhm.
I was pretending to be and who I was, I would get hurt by either or. I'd be hurt if you didn't like my pretend version, or if you didn't like the things that the real me liked. So I just created more ways to get my feelings hurt with these two personas or whatever. And then as I was more willing to be honest with other people and gain true friendships based on me being weird, right? Um, then that built my confidence in healthy relationships, which helped me deal with the fact that, you know what, it doesn't matter if people don't like that fake me, because that fake me is actually not me at all. So I just need to stop,
Mhm.
bringing that fake me to the party or whatever. Um, no, that's really excellent. And I'm wondering if you felt like that's the first part, and then is the second part actually having to engage with people who don't like you, and um, you know, I think there's a growing curve to the idea of there's people who like me for me or who I am, and then there's people who like what I do or don't like what I do, like in content creation or in singing or whatever else it may be.
Yeah, how I deal with people who it, the the first story that comes to my head, I don't even know if it's necessarily directly tied to the question, but I think it came to the surface, so it's worth sharing anyway. I remember one time in high school, or sorry, middle school, like I was waiting outside the library because the librarian was at lunch, and so the door was locked. I had some books to return or wanted to check something out. I don't remember that part exactly, but I was waiting out there for her to come back from lunch, and like the most popular girl in school came by, and she was trying to get into the library, and I was like, oh, she's at lunch right now. She should be back in a minute or so. She's like, okay, I'll just wait. So we were waiting there, and she was like this girl that was like, oh, my middle school self, like, oh, she's hot and she's popular, everyone likes her, and we started having a conversation, and it was like, yeah, we were just talking. I was like, oh, this is kind of funny. Like, we're just kind of talking, and like a minute goes by, and then she's like, stop. I am not having a conversation with Cameron Gilbert, am I? And she just walked away in the middle of the conversation. And I'm like, that to this day, no one has been meaner to me than that girl at that middle school interaction. I mean, that really, obviously it hurt my feelings. Um, and that did not help me learn how to deal with people that don't like me at all. That was just like, I was like, wow, that was like, but I'm actually grateful for that interaction because like as an adult I don't really care that much. Like I was like, okay, she was just some like bratty little girl or whatever. But I was like, it felt like I don't know, like an awakening. I was like, I didn't know someone could think that way about another person almost. Like it was like I didn't like I wasn't even like a normal person to her. I was an other kind of thing. And I was like, well, this was just very interesting to me. Um but besides that sad story, when people don't like my stuff, it's just or me, it just like it doesn't really mostly people like me and the people that don't like me are usually misunderstood something or heard something about me. Like in high school, some people didn't like me, and this is going to sound very funny because, including my girlfriend, because there was a rumor that I wanted to have sex with my sister. All right, now is this a valid reason to not like somebody? Maybe, maybe not. Who could debate? But the truth was, I told my friends, my buddies, that I thought my stepsister was attractive. I
Mm.
was 16, she was like 18 or 17, whatever. She was like a year ahead of me, maybe 2 years ahead of me. And I was like, that's what I met her when I was like 15, 16, and she was like a year or two ahead of me, and she had like double D cup breasts, right? I was like, she is so hot. And then it somehow me telling my buddies that they also, by the way, they all thought she was hot too. Duh.
Yeah.
But me saying that, they're like, oh, Cameron wants to fuck his biological sister. That's how the rumor ended up going around the school.
Mhm.
And that kind of stuff was like, yeah, some people genuinely didn't like me, including my girlfriend, because she thought I was some weird incest guy. And that didn't bother me that much because I was like, well, you're just like, I was like, no, I don't. I don't. You're misunderstanding the story. But also, I'm like, I know you're misunderstanding. I bet you don't know anything about me, actually. Um, and then, like, in other times like that, like, one time in my entire life ever has someone called me an asshole that I can remember, like, unless I phase it out. And I was at work at McDonald's, and my buddy, he has like he like broke his arm, so it was like in a cast or something like this, and I was like teasing him or something, and this customer was like, hey, you, and I was like, yeah, hi, how can I help you? He's like, you're an asshole. And I remember he said it right to my face, and I remember this is what I did. I was like, me? I remember looking around. I was like, are you talking? No one's ever accused me of anything like that before. And I was like, it was like, he's like, you're picking on this poor kid with a broken arm. Like, it's like, I promise, I'm so sorry. This is like my little brother. He's like literally my best work friend. I'm giving him a hard time, but I promise this is purely love because I care about him. And the guy did not care at all. He was like, you're an asshole. And he ran out of the store. Um, how does that relate to your question? I don't know. But these are the things that my subconsciousness decided to pull up to the top. I haven't had to deal with that many people that don't fundamentally like me. I've had some YouTube drama. Um, and again, that was someone called me out on YouTube, and people started leaving comments like, "You got cooked, bro. You got cooked. Delete your channel." And I watched the video, and I was like, they just fundamentally they didn't even watch my video. They have no, they're everything is either if they watch my video, they're lying maliciously. If they didn't watch my video, then they're just saying stuff that's so secondhand that they didn't actually know about. So it didn't really bug me. I didn't even make a response video. I just wrote a post. I'm like, hey, they don't know what they're talking about, or they're misinformed at the very least. So that kind of stuff just doesn't come up that much.
Well, it sounds like even when it does come up, you had a good way of dealing with it. I was a lot more sensitive about things in general, and and I would pretend that things didn't bother me in high school, etc. Right? But until I dropped that facade and revealed who I truly was, like I was bothered a lot. And I eventually what I figured out is like the people who like me for who I am are the people who are the most important, what their opinion is. And then I had to experience being disliked for a variety of reasons, for either being socially awkward or being too blunt, being, what other people might perceive as mean, right? And then, actually working through and talking with the person who felt I was mean and understanding why they felt that way so that I could adjust and present myself better or whatever. One of the toughest things that I can remember is going to sound really silly, but a long time ago when the Pokemon trading card game wasn't that big of a deal, there was a content creator that they called Puka, Kyle something, and he ended up stopping his streaming and going to work for Pokemon back in like 2014 or something. And I was playing against him and he was streaming. and I was like just messing around with my little brother who was like 7 at the time, and I was showing my little brother like how to play Pokemon and some cool stuff that you could do, and I didn't even pay attention to the person I was playing because I don't look at people's names or whatever when I play them online, and it ended up getting recorded, and he basically made fun of me about how horrible I was at Pokemon, right? And I was playing competitively in the scene, and it was like super embarrassing. And of course, I tried to defend myself, which you should never do. You should just be like, "Oh yeah, I didn't play well that game." You know what I mean? Instead, I said, "No, you don't
or
understand.
something. Yeah,
It
it's
was
like
my little brother. I was just showing him some stuff and whatever. I didn't even know I was playing, this famous person." Which in reality he wasn't famous. He had like 1,000 subscribers, you know what I mean? But it felt like he was famous at the time. And I thought I was never going to live it down, and I cried because this guy said I was horrible at Pokemon, and I was like 24, 25 years old.
but that's like one of your cornerstones of your identity at that part of your life is that you're good at Pokemon or you're good at trading card games, you're a good gamer. So some variation of that. So to have someone that you view as kind of an authority to some aspect to completely remove that pillar, like it obviously it's like yeah, it sounds like a silly example in a sense, but like it makes total sense. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be guitar, right? Would people take it more seriously if it was guitar? You're trying your best and you're showing your little brother how silly you can make the thing sound, and then fucking Darren from System of a Down comes down like, look at this, give it up, kid, give it up. Like that would crush you, absolutely crush you, um, because it's like yeah, if an authority directly undermines one of your core identities, like how would that not affect you drastically? It's like your dad saying he's disappointed in you, right? It's like that hurts. Poof, man. That my dad told me he was disappointed in me one time in my life, and I have never forgot it. Now I don't think. Now I'm hope my dad's disappointed with me because I think he's kind of a dumby sometimes about some of this stuff, right? I'm like, you should be disappointed because I'm making good decisions and you're making bad decisions. But like when I was then as a kid, I was like, holy shit, I cried. I cried just from the words. It's because the well, I'm not sure if I'll one up you, but we'll do it. My dad wanted me to go on a bike ride with him. And I was like, I don't feel like going on a bike ride. He's like, well, you said you would. I'm like, yeah, but I'm tired. I don't want to go on a bike ride. He's like, you don't have to go, but I'm just disappointed in you for not going. And I cried when he was gone. I remember looking up, was like, Dad, come back. I'll go on the bike ride with you. Like, and it's nothing, right? And I don't even think he meant for his words to have that much weight because it's like he probably was like a little bummed out, but like I was actually crushed in that moment for like hours, waited for him to come back. I was like, I love you, Dad. How was your bike ride? And that, so like, it doesn't matter how silly it seems. It really just lines up with what you perceive and like in your I guess in your words it'd be like your perception of how you predict things would go and then how it isn't that
Yeah, exactly. And it
absolutely
can, and some of
crushes.
these examples can make you question a pillar of who you think you are, right? I'm a great card game player. Ooh, I'm not a great card game player. Well, then what am I? If I'm not a great card game player,
Yeah,
then who am I? I'm a good son. Ooh, I'm not a good. Well, then who am I? You know what I mean? Yeah, those are fundamental things. And much like your example before with the girl, once I got some distance from that, maybe like a year later, I was glad it happened, right? Because it really helped me like come to terms with um, being understood and being able to deal with it and be prepared for it. But like the first time something like this happens, where you have an authority figure or somebody that you respect, challenge or or degrade a pillar of your identity, that's really tough.
yeah, and they're always good. They're not always good, I guess, but they're lessons. They're lessons we learn, and that makes you stronger in a lot of ways. It just helps you. I don't know if I want to say it in a kind of way that you would. It lets you update your data array for future assessments, or whatever.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Oh, I lost you again.
sorry about that. We're back now. It's this thing is sensitive, and I move it around a lot. Um, whatever I said, I was going to keep rambling, but the point is, there was a period on the end of that.
Yeah. No. And just kind of show, like you said, you grow from it. right? So when it comes to like the idea of precision weighting in active inference, right? When you have a unique experience that really changes the way you weigh things, right? So now you have new data. Like I always tell my kids this: um, everyone has something that happened to them that's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. You know what I mean? And the realm of your pain tolerance or the idea of what you think pain can be exists within those kind of 2 points of the least painful and the most painful thing you've ever experienced. And when you get a new most painful experience, then that changes the weight of any given experience in between, right? So scabbing your knee when you're a kid and you haven't had that many painful experiences is a huge deal. That's why kids cry when they skin their knee. Skinning your knee as, a 35-year-old man generally ends up not being that big of a deal because you have so many things that are way above that in horrible things that have happened to you, not just physically but even like existentially, etc. So getting those data points,
Th-
as painful as it is, I think is super important to growing as a person.
this is an idea that I think I really really at my core believe, and I haven't been able to articulate it to people in a good way yet. I don't think I've this is I think sympathy is really good here. I think you need sympathy. I don't think empathy is the right thing, but understanding someone where they are is so important for this kind of thing. You know, like we could make fun of a baby drops whatever. You know, a baby has like a little snack and they drop it and they weep. Right. This is literally at that point the worst thing that has ever happened to them in their existence, and it's nothing. Right. It's minuscule, but you don't laugh at the baby. I mean, maybe you giggle a little bit because it's funny, but like you like, oh, we're sorry, baby. You know, we help you out. Like you have to have sympathy for people in these situations. And I think a great example, like the baby's a little more extreme, but like I work in a middle school, right? There are girls and boys that like they have their little fake boyfriend or girlfriend like dump them or write something mean on a bathroom stall about them, right? And they're crushed. And you don't need to have, I don't think empathy is the right word because you don't need to feel like you just lost, you don't need to feel that exact same way they feel, but to understand that where they're at, they have just been betrayed for the most serious betrayal of their life has happened, right? Maybe it's not a mom or a dad or something, but it's like still this is a level of betrayal, and there are literally children that kill themselves. There are children that kill themselves over silly dumb things as our 30-plus-year-old selves would see. But if you don't take these problems seriously for them, you're increasing the risk of that kind of stuff. So like people just diminish children's problems because they're not serious in magnitude, but they're not taking into account the magnitude of what it is to them. Um, if you've only experienced pretty good stuff, pretty minor stuff can be very, very destructive to you in a way that, and if no one takes you seriously, who knows the ramifications it could have, right? You feel like no one has your back, and when you're at your lowest, and you feel like the whole world is against you, and you feel like there's no one to turn to, they can quickly turn into super dark thoughts. And I haven't figured out the best way to articulate this whole idea, but I know that children kill themselves, which is they commit suicide over the silliest things. But that's why I really think you need to have super strong sympathy for their problems, not necessarily enable them but I don't want to talk in circles, but I think these things deserve to be taken seriously.
No, I think you bring up a very deep and important point, right? So we often forget about our development to who we are, right? All the things we went through on the way to becoming who we are, whether you're 35 or 25 or whatever. At some point, you were a kid who was crying about nothing, right? And the reality is that means you can't treat that child like they're crying about nothing. Now, what happens a lot, and this sucks, and this happened to me and probably to you, is there's plenty of people who were invalidated when they were a kid and when they felt something that truly felt to them because it was one of the worst things that happened to them. And when they were told it was nothing and were not validated, they built that into themselves. So then when they get into the future and they realize, oh yeah, it really was nothing, then they start invalidating other people, right? And it just becomes this like cycle of invalidation when in reality, the healthier and probably more beneficial thing for society is to be understanding and be like, you know what, I wish when I was your age and I was in that situation that somebody would have given me the sympathy that I'm giving you. You know what I mean? And kind of trying to pass it on for people to feel like they can actually develop. Because you know what, in 10 years they're gonna feel like it was stupid too. But what matters is the right now when they're going through those emotions and dealing with that situation.
Yeah, and they're developing, right? Like this is part of their development. And I like obviously I think it's super important. I don't want to get too much into an empathy versus sympathy thing. I consider myself someone that struggles with empathy, but I feel like I have very strong sympathy for people in general. Like I'm very understanding and I'm like I totally understand what you're going through and I want to help you. It does not affect my emotional state necessarily. Um, but more it's like I don't know. But I think this could be expanded also to just even adults, right? Like I don't like invalidating other people's issues in general just because they haven't had as bad of a life as I may have had or as you might have had, right? Like it's like someone that had their wife cheat on them, which is terrible, is like, well, yeah, but I've had three wives that have cheated on me. Like, what fucking arbitrary line do we draw in the sand? Like, I think you should just always have sympathy for people and their problems. If something's really not a big deal and their wife cheats on them and they don't say anything about it, like, because like, I will, like, there are people that don't look for like this really terrible thing happened to me because they've built up an immunity to it in a sense, and like you don't need to seek out people's problems to feel bad for. But I feel like if someone is presenting something as a problem, like you should at least give them sympathy and not just invalidate their issues, regardless of their age or their time or their stuff. And obviously, like I don't want to. There's no such thing as blanket statements, right? There's definitely times where people should be like get a little bit of a reality check,
Yeah.
you know. But I think it is a fair balance, especially though in children, where it's like you don't understand they have no lived experience. It's important to that they feel loved and supported by a society that cares about them, not just being made fun of. Like, oh, sorry, your boyfriend was kissing another girl. Your boyfriend that you had you guys were dating for 3 hours and now he's dating someone else. Oh, boo hoo. It's like, yeah, but this, do you understand that like this could affect children are impressionable. This could affect their trust of men in general. And maybe it doesn't, maybe it does, but I could tell you one thing, just laughing at them is not the way to healthily help them deal with it in a healthy way.
Yeah, well, particularly if you're a figure of authority in their life, right? Because like the biggest thing
Yeah.
they're probably gonna remember from that is not that the boyfriend of 3 hours cheated on them or whatever. It's gonna be how they were treated by their parents and their loved ones, etc. When that happened, and I know I was often invalidated in my situations, and it took me forever to unlearn that as a mechanism when I'm dealing with other people, right? So like if you're a person that has a lot of aces and has dealt with a lot of issues, it's so easy to try to undermine other people's problems who have just not lived, as difficult a life in those domains. But that doesn't mean that they don't deserve sympathy, etc. And you really want to like if there was a meta strategy here that you're kind of explaining, I think it'd be something like you are not who you are right now. You are the combination of every version of you that has grown up and developed. And if you abandon the idea of who those previous versions were, then you lose your ability to have sympathy for other people who are still going through similar things. Just because when I was 10, my only caretaker died and then I had to go into foster care doesn't mean that somebody else's, parent dying when they're a grown man doesn't affect them really hard, right? Like, but at one point in life I would have definitely said, well, you're just a giant pussy because I lost my dad when I was 10 and that was way worse than what happened to you. That's such an asshole kind of thing to say, where like, you know what I mean? um but I do think it's the default position is you only view from your current experience and you don't spend enough time thinking about, you know what, when I was 10 that was the end of the freaking world, man. Like, and it was really hard, and even though I ended up okay, and just because you're 35 and now you're going through losing your parent, it doesn't mean that's any less meaningful.
100, yeah. I mean, I think this idea could be extrapolated like to pretty much all aspects of life, where even like really petty stuff, where it's like they nerf a character in a video game. It's like, well, I beat the game when this character was before nerfed, and now you're complaining the game is still hard after. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can go as little or there's situations where it's definitely more serious, but in general, I just don't understand invalidating someone's problems in that way. Um, not trying to have sympathy for what someone is going through, and I mean, I don't know. There are times where people are being a pussy, I guess, and to some extent in some situations, I guarantee that happens. But like, what is the like you said? What's the meta strategy of like what's good for society? Is if everyone just invalidates everything that's slightly easier than what they had? Like that doesn't it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like I'm like, oh, Elden Ring is hard, and this guy that doesn't have fucking hands beat it with his mouth on a controller, and he's like, you think this hard? Like, what? Hey, asshole with no hands, why are you being mean to me? He has the right to belittle my problems. All right, I'll give him permission, but like, I don't know. It in all aspects of life is just like everyone. I think in the video game world, it's way less serious, but like everyone can experience it. It's like, oh, is that boss supposed to be hard?
Mhm.
Get good. It's like, oh, come on, bro. It's like I'm just trying to find someone that's had a similar experience to me, not for a bunch of people to invalidate and belittle my trials here, right? And that's like a silly thing. It's just a dumb video game. But I think as a like you're right, it's the default position. People like to invalidate anything. If you did something at 100 and someone did it at 99, you're like, bro, I did it at 100. Why are you complaining about 99? It's like, and I think that's like a bad strategy. So I try to look at that in myself, and before I try to say something about someone's issues, I need to work harder on my girlfriend. My brain to my mouth is shorter with her than it is with other people. And I think that's just a side effect of being so comfortable.
Yes,
Um,
of being
so
comfortable and
so
safe.
I do need to rewire that sometimes, but especially when I talk to others, I try to take a second to be like, all right, don't just like say like, oh, that's not a problem. It's like, yeah, that really sucks. I hope it looks up, or is like, you know what, I know that this is gonna look up, or relationship advice, all kinds of stuff. Just I don't know. I guess maybe it all boils down to like just be a good person, be there for people that are looking for someone to be there for to an extent.
Yeah. And well, I think it boils down to like what is being a good person? You know what I mean? These Socratic questions, and I think we can give like these we can figure out just through what we truly believe. You know what I mean? And having these, uh, I don't remember if they're called diacratic or whatever they're called, conversations. Where two people are searching for truth and just being honest. It's like it seems like for you and me, we believe um, that when people are honest about who they have been and reflective, and then give that um, you know compassion to other people, that seems to be a better strategy for society than the default of invalidation.
I agree. That sounds like a good idea, but it's like I like the sorry, I was thinking of two things at the same time. I like the way you put that. What I was going to say is like I like the way these ideas come around in the first spot. Like I can remember specifically when I had this kind of thought, and before it kind of fully developed into a thing. But it was exactly like it was the exact first situation in like a middle school girl, elementary school girl, high school girl. I don't remember, but there was some like underage girl, and like her boyfriend broke up with her, or he was like cheated on her with like someone else or something, right? But they were only dating like a week. Like it was like by adult standards, this wasn't even really necessarily a relationship. It was just, but like they were like teachers were like making fun of it, or it's like people around were like making fun of it, like authority figures were like maybe not directly to her, but they were like laughing about it, or like oh yeah, their little week long relationship didn't actually work out. Who'd have thought? Things like that. And I remember hearing it, and I was just thinking like, but this is like the most traumatic thing that's maybe has happened in their life, and we know teen suicides are like on the rise year after year from all this dumb social media stuff. This is even this guy is gonna could post her nudes online, and this other person could do this and do that. Like these are things that are worth being treated seriously, even if they're small in scope, because of how important it is to this individual, and this person is important. So yeah, like invalidating their problems is like this was, I just remember this specific situation that kind of put this little bit of an idea into my head of like, well, why aren't you taking their problems seriously? If you just look at things in context, like this is very serious to them, and in a sense, what's more real than what's real to her is basically the most real thing to her, and we want her to develop into a good person, or into a fully fledged healthy person without trust issues and stuff like that. And so these problems deserve to be taken seriously. So we put the boy to death. That was the only way. No, I'm joking, but it's like I like how these ideas can come up. It was like a little thing that made me go like that, and then it kind of further developed into like a whole idea about invalidating of people's problems in general. So sometimes you don't know where you're. I would not have thought that is where something that I consider like a core value of how I try to treat other people would come from. You don't really know where it's going to come from.
Yeah, the most random situations can really help you develop the idea of who you want to be, right? So, for me, a lot of it was, and I say this all the time, and don't call CPS, but when I was a young single father with my first child, I wasn't the best father, right? And it's because I was still developing myself. I didn't really even know what I was doing, etc. And so a lot of the things that I learned were as he got older, 4, 5, 6, and started having his own issues, etc. Is that's how I personally figured out the whole like invalidation thing, because it's like I caught myself invalidating his issues because of my childhood that was much worse than his, and I'm like, why would I want to do that? Like, I hated when people invalidated my childhood. Like, I should actually be one of the most compassionate, right, and most reliable people for my son. So, um, it's not about these things are super easy to figure out or whatever. But I think once you're honest with yourself about how you did develop and that you're not who you are today. You weren't that person 10, 20 years ago. Like that's. But I feel like we treat ourselves like that's the case a lot of the time, or the way we represent ourselves to other is that like this finished version of ourselves, which we're never finished, but the most finished version of ourselves right now is who we've always been, and then we treat other people and their mistakes that we would have made at the same point in our development as something lesser than.
And this might be a big point or a tiny point. I don't even know entirely. But like just to quickly touch on it, I feel like this is like a situation where I think empathy is a bad thing and sympathy is a really good thing. I think if someone's having a problem like this, like especially when it's like actually not like murder or genocide, when it's actually like a relatively small in the realm of reality problem, I don't think getting on your knees and sobbing with them is like a helpful thing. I think that's giving necessarily too much weight to something that may not be that serious, and like really trying to take that emotional state into yourself isn't. I think like when it's a smaller problem, like your son, I don't know, freaking he doesn't like that the crust isn't cut off his bread. Mom always cut the crust off the bread. Why dad can't do it? I don't like, it's like having sympathy, but also being able to educate and like not letting yourself get tied down into this, I think is really, really the key there is being there, being understanding of what it's trying to see it from their perspective, but also not just giving into like whatever despair they have, like trying to use this as a learning moment. They're like, listen, I know this is really hard, or maybe not with the stupid crust shit, like that may be a bad example, but it's like, yeah, I understand that mom always cut the crust, but sometimes in life you're gonna find people that aren't going to want to cut the crust off the bread, and maybe you're going to have to cut the crust off the bread yourself. No one said you can't have crustless sandwiches. um, but dad's got to go to work or something. I don't know. Like the
Hmm.
idea is, I think that I wanted to highlight is I think empathy, it could be a bad thing if it's used in the wrong way at the wrong times in these kinds of situations, where sympathy could be a very, very good thing. Um, and I'm defining empathy and sympathy as basically understanding versus putting yourself in their
Yeah,
shoes like fully,
embodiment.
like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, embodying them versus being next to them.
Yes, and I think
Um,
there's a time and a place for both, and I think you illustrated that well. So, if I were to paraphrase what you were exploring, it'd be something like, um, when that girl was struggling with her boy breaking up with her, you crying with her is not actually going to be beneficial to her, but having somebody who can validate her feelings and explain in a way that is compassionate, that things are going to be okay. You know what I mean? Everyone goes through this, and it is really hard when it happens. You know what I mean? That shows a whole bunch of different positive things, right? That one, this is not uniquely horrible to her, right? Two, her feelings are real and valid. Like three, that people who had this happen can turn into people who are oh, how would I want to say that, stable adults or stable people who are able to then use their stability to help somebody else, right? And that therefore she will someday be able to become somebody like that. Like it doesn't do all these things explicitly, but very implicitly. You know what I mean? It shows these positive qualities. So while if you were to cry with her, that would be really weird, and I don't know if it would really have much of a positive effect other than it might feel cathartic, you know what I mean? But outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could have a negative effect where it's like you're like, hey, not only are you are your feelings heard, but these are the correct feelings to have about this 100%. He is a real piece of shit, and
Mm.
Ben Art can't be trusted. I feel like this could reinforce the worst thing in their minds, in a sense. Like there's like a sweet spot between like you don't want to say something like listen, there's lots of boys are going to want to date you, okay, it's fine, he's gone, right? Like there's between that and being like, look, this is really hard. It's like, I'm so sorry that you went through this. I remember when my first, like, I had a boyfriend do the exact same thing when I was in middle school, and it was the hardest, like, whatever. It was the hardest month of my life. But then I met your father or whatever. You can make it into something like, I know that this is really hard right now, but I promise it will get easier over time. Like there is a sweet spot, but you don't want to just feed into the negativity that they're feeling as well, because I feel like that could also have negative consequences. This is all like, I think it boils down. I use that term too much, but I think this isn't as hard as it sounds. I think if you check yourself, you are, as a human, pretty in tune with the correct course of action with our, like, just inherent knowledge, whether that be societal or actual biological or evolutionary, I don't know. But as long as you don't give in to your first impulse to, like, invalidate, you understand how to react in a better situation. Like once you catch your first reaction, then it's not rocket science. Like, how do I say this perfectly so that I am only enforcing the positives with that, while that validating her? I think it's not rocket science to that point. I don't want to make it sound like it's this perfect spot. Don't cry, don't shed a tear, but also, don't belittle her. I think it's
No,
a pretty big middle ground.
and I think you explained that pretty well. Like basically, you just treat them golden rule style, right? Like when I was that age, what would have made me feel better, right? You do that after pausing for a second, because I think there's just as many people who will either be too empathetic or not validate. Those are just opposite sides of those two things. Like, oh, everything is going to be fine. You get over it. Or versus, you're right about all of this. Men are the worst. Blah blah. Like your father was like this, and that's why I hate him. Like you can see the two sides, and you're like, you just try to be somewhere in the middle, and you use your own intuitive, like when I was that age and I was going through something similar. What would have made me feel better.
It's crazy. You could talk for hours, and at the end, it does come back to, like, yeah, the golden rule is pretty good. The
It
golden
turns
rule is a
out.
pretty good way to live your life. Like it is like there's the joke, right? It's like, do unto others as you have them do unto you, said the rapist. It's like, okay, yeah, that's like a really, like, dark way to take that, but even that is like, it's funny if you're like, as a joke, but it's like, obviously it's a joke because, like, that person doesn't want some stranger to rape them, right? It's like, it still totally applies. It's not like
Yeah, it
there's
doesn't
like basically
invalidate it.
no except, it
Yeah.
doesn't invalidate the rule at all. It does, like, it's like a joke, but there's basically no exception to the golden rule that I could think of easily. Maybe there's always an exception to some rule somewhere, but you make exceptions for the exceptions and you live by the rule, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think like as we go through this podcast, because we're wrapping up now in future episodes, like old boring wisdom is usually like pretty good. You know what I mean? The golden rule. We'll go over a bunch of other of these kind of things, not even on purpose, right? Like we just happened to walk into a scenario where at the very end we were like, oh yeah, we kind of just said the best way to deal with being empathetical of people when you don't invalidate them, especially children, is by using the golden rule.
Yeah, when you were a child, and if you came back because your yo-yo string broke and you're crying, like, I cried, I wept. I remember my mom invalidating my issues one time, and I remember it. I'm 33 and I remember it. And I remember my Game Boy broke. I inked the screen. If you're old enough, you'll know what that means. It's like the screen was inked, and I was weeping because I thought all my Pokemon had died, right? I didn't understand the save was on the cartridge, whatever. But I was like, my Pokemon, and she's like, it's just a game, because I was weeping. She's like, it's just, at first she's like, oh, so, it's like, yeah, okay, we'll get you one in the next couple days or something. We'll see if we can get it fixed or something. She's like, it's just a Game Boy. Like, calm down. It's just a Game Boy. But to me, it's like I thought my 150-hour playthrough of Pokemon and my Pokemon with their nicknames were all dead. You know, it was like this was so traumatic for me as like a kid. And obviously as an adult, it's like it's nothing, right? No, who cares? But like that kind of stuff is as a kid, I did not want my feeling to be invalidated in that way, right? It doesn't matter what no one wants whatever their little problem is to be treated as like it's not important, nothing. So the golden rule applies perfectly here, right? You would want an adult or someone of authority who loves you to take this seriously, um, and then tell you everything's going to be okay, basically, right? You don't want to be told everything's going to shit. What are we going to do? You want someone to also be able, like, yeah, this will work out. You know, don't worry, we'll get it fixed. This is the kind of problem that is easily addressed.
Yeah, and even the hardest men, which are not us, but even the hardest men who are like, my life was hell and everything was bad and whatever. It's like if they really are honest with themselves about what they wish they had when they were a child, it's nothing like what they actually experienced. They might have became the person they are because of that experience, but they can understand that they would have liked if somebody would have been a little bit softer. Right? They didn't need somebody to sit down and cry with them. But if they would have been invalidated a couple less times, maybe they wouldn't be so emotionally shut off.
Well, and I think even as a third party, we can all look at these guys that I don't know if they're as common anymore, but it's like, listen, I wasn't soft growing up. I got, my uncle effed me, and then I had to get a job at 9 years old, and I just fucking got to work with six kids that my mom died from heroin, and I had to live my life, and it was a hard lessons to learn, but I took care of my family. It's like no one in a third person is like, this is how we want people to turn out. This is exactly what we want. You nailed it. We want people to be in this situation and to feel the way you feel. Is like that is not a well-rounded person. And not saying that they did anything wrong by coping with life however they had to cope with it, by really, really getting a shell, otherwise it would destroy them. Like I'm not I'm not saying what they did is bad, but like as any third person, we all see that that's not what we want for people, right? We don't. There's no way that they're as happy as they could have been. There's no way that they're going to do as much good for the world as a whole as they potentially could have. Develop, help raise more well-adjusted people, help bring more productive people of society into the world, like spread more love. None of that stuff is going to be as true because of their life. And so we just know that we want better for everybody. And I think it's kind of that's why it's important to think before you speak. It's harder for me than it is for others, I think, but um just try to understand other people at the end of the day, I guess.
Yeah, and to wrap up this episode, I think you kind of led us right into another, old-timey kind of thing. This one would be Kant or Kant or however you pronounce that, but great philosopher, where he basically said, rules are made to apply to everyone. You know what I mean? You like whatever you want to hold other people to, you have to hold yourself to, and the rule has to work for everybody. So when you're talking about like, there's strategies that work for everybody and there's strategies that don't. Well, when I say work, I mean improve the conditions of society, right? And people can
Mhm.
argue about the definitions of those things, but I think we all have an innate idea of like relatively what is good and what is bad in those terms. And we know the example you gave with that person who had a really tough life. That's not what we want for everyone universally, right? So we can kind of lean back towards the golden rule is producing something that meets more of the Kantian constraints of, does that really work? If everybody uses this strategy, is life going to be better or worse?
Yeah, yeah, I think human innate. I don't know how much of human knowledge is innate and how much of it is societal, but I feel like a lot of people, at least in the United States, different. Maybe it isn't human. I don't know, but it's a lot of us know instinctively, if that's the right word, innately, kind of what a lot of good decisions are. And I'm sure that we're fatally flawed in some ways
Mhm.
that we're blind to, but it's not in general, being a good person, you may not get 100% there on your own with like just understanding, but like I feel like you roughly know 80% of how to be a good person, whether or not you live that and you're true to yourself and who you are versus who you want to be all lines up. But I feel like people like, okay, the golden rule is like it wasn't made in the United States, the Western United States, right? I mean, this is you could whether the term golden rule or whatever, but like I think this is like a human nature thing that is kind of instilled in us almost. Maybe it has to be taught. I'm skeptical of that. I almost feel like if you put two humans in a on Mars together and they never knew about Earth, they would develop the golden rule really quickly, right? They would understand, well, or they would kill each other. But the idea is you put a society in general, they would understand, well, one guy is stealing from everybody, and then he gets killed, right? Because they're like, hey, we can't have you stealing from everybody. People just automatically will form like, all right, we have to have some structure, and in general, you don't punch me, I don't punch you, you know?
Yeah, well, I think some of your premises were a little bit flawed, but we're gonna let that go because like I don't really want to take things in bad faith. You know what I mean? But the what you were really saying, I think, is a deep and brilliant point. So, um, when
That's
you're
right.
looking just across the history of different cultures, we seem to come across similar ideas regardless of the culture, right? And the golden rule is one of those ideas, right? The value of human life is one of those ideas. Now, it's not always that everyone was equal, right? But at different points in times on different cultures, they came up with the idea that human life is inherently valuable. Not equally as valuable, but is valuable. And similar things with the golden rule. And if that happened, then that means that, yeah, your Mars example, if there was an entire culture and they were starting over from scratch culture wise, should see similar results, right? There are certain patterns of or strategies of dealing with each other that seem to emerge because they're what works best among humans. um, and then that gets carried on and taught, but I think it can be independently found.
And just to sign off, like to agree with like human life is innately valuable, I don't think you need to look any further than I mean, you could look at slavery in the US or slavery anywhere. Anytime there is basically anytime there is a group of people completely subjugating another group of people, one of the first things they do is they dehumanize them. They're 2/5 of a person. Yeah, they have some human qualities, but they're not really people because it just doesn't fit with their worldview to treat
Hmm.
people like them like that. So that's the very first thing that happens always. So because it's true in their mind, human life as inherent value. So thus these can't be full people in that way in order for us to treat them this way. They're half dog, half this, it's like dog's life has inherent value, but it's no human life, like that. So I think that just shows that how things could be true, but also not necessarily value still.
Yeah, and I would say that like from an anthropological lens, um like tribes kind of come up with the internal people are more valuable than the external people, but that's just because you could say their definition of human is the in group, right? It's like people like
Yeah.
us. And then over time, as cultures get bigger and bigger and bigger, um, that expands the definition of who is us, who is human, etc. And we've reached the point now where, at least I believe in the Western world, we kind of just agree that all human life is equal. There's plenty of times in different places in the world where they literally wrote down that all human life is equal, but they didn't mean that verbatim. You know what I mean? They meant us. We're actually all equal or value. You know what I mean? Like, but not those people
Yeah,
who are
yeah.
lesser
Like
because they use the exact
we're the
strategies
humans.
you talk
We're
about.
we're the humans. They're the we're the humans. They're the Mongols, right? They're not like us.
Yeah.
They're the others. And I still think human life is all inherently equal is like an obvious truth, but also obviously not lived in. Like no one would like if the president, Donald Trump, no matter how much you hate him, he's a hostage and Joe the janitor's a hostage, right? No one's gonna really try. No, like you want them both to live 100%, but the value proposition is not the same on both of these positions in that situation. Whether or not they really are, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, they either they both get out ideally, but like society will put more value on the person that's democratically elected to run the world, right? So that is, I think that is just a truth that of humans that power will place your life, not, I don't know if value is the right word, but maybe important. Like the downsides of you dying, it affects a lot of people. So it's like
Yes.
it becomes an arithmetic almost, as
I
opposed to a
want to
value.
be a little bit more clear with how we define this because um you're onto something, but I don't think you believe exactly the verbiage that you're using. So to try to help you with the verbiage, right? I think there would be human life and human utility are two different things, and some people have more utility, but the value of their life is equal.
Yeah, yeah. I inherently believe all human life is equal, and but you're absolutely like I guess all I'm trying to drill down on is like, a guy has a gun is like, all right, vote now democratically. I'm either going to shoot the president or I'm going to shoot Joe the janitor. I'm a janitor, by the way. It's like the vote would not be close, right? Like, maybe it would. Like the Democrats are like, come on, Joe, come on, Joe the janitor. But the idea is like in reality, the vote would not actually be close because of, I guess, human utility is how you want to put it. Yeah, I don't. Value versus utility are, if they're different things. I think it's just a verbiage thing, like you said.
I do think
Inherently,
it's different. I think human value is just the idea that humans exist and have equal value, and then it's like, but the utility each human has is more intrinsic to their decisions and their power, etc. Right?
okay, yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me as a way to define it and keep them separate, where the worldview can be consistent while also
Yes.
having. I don't want to slip into the they're the others, but kind of thing where it's like,
Hmm.
okay, we have a fancy way of saying why it's okay to kill this guy and not kill this guy, but at the
Yes.
same time, yeah,
I still don't believe people should be killed based on their lack of utility, right? But when you're
a
dealing with
hundred.
these thought ideas about like this person and there's a huge gap in utility, that is the mechanism behind why people are choosing the president versus, right? Or you could
And
pick
again,
somebody who's just universally loved over a random person, and it's just because that person has more utility to the world or to the person who you're asking.
and I do kind of feel like that comes to like you make exceptions for the exceptions and live by the rules kind of thing. Is like, yeah, like how often is that's the definition of like a thought experiment, right? Is like, when is this ever going to happen, right? But that is something that is worth thinking about a little bit, I suppose, still. But I don't even know how that topic came up of a human value versus human utility. But
Me either. But it now that we're on an odd number, now I feel like we have to go a little bit further. But you just this entire thing kind of brought me to. Do you remember Jordan Peterson versus the 20 people and how bad that went, etc. Right, the misunderstanding, etc.
I started to watch it and then I ended up not watching it because I'm like, it feels like one person speaking Japanese, one speaking Spanish. It's like there's not a middle ground of people that know how to even communicate with each other because they just talk so differently. And I was like, I just feel like I'm gonna waste my time like watching this. Like I don't feel like I'm gonna educate myself in any way. Um, because
Yeah.
some people are like me, and like when Jordan starts really kind of going into his stuff, like he loses me in some of his poetic or like allegory, or it's like, because I'm still kind of a Richard Dawkins thinker. I'm like, yeah, but the sky is blue at the end, it's like, or the ocean's blue. Okay, I get it. I get the ocean is a metaphysical manifestation of human desires, and the waves are turbulent. But like, what color is the ocean? It's like, well, dark is the color of the bottom of the ocean. I was like, okay, I get it. But like, there's just a lot of talking past. So please say what you were gonna say.
No, you're absolutely right, and I can't say that it wasn't a waste of my time. And it was two people with completely different understandings of reality, talking past each other the whole time. But at one point, somebody put him in a thought experiment, right? Because he was saying that basically he believes that telling the truth always leads to the best outcome, right? Regardless of whatever. And he meant that as a meta strategy, right? So across time, across all history, if people were to tell the truth, they would be better off. But the way he was saying it was in the example of him, himself, Jordan Peterson. So that's very easy to misunderstand. And of course, people can pick that apart. They're like, I can come up with scenarios where it wouldn't be the best thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, that kind of
Yeah.
misses the point of the meta strategy. But Jordan doesn't drop it because he's worried that them proving there's a chink in his ideological armor would unravel the entire thing, right? So he goes along with uh, their thought experiment that doesn't even line up with the spirit of what he's trying to say when he probably shouldn't have, right? And so they say, all right, so you're in Nazi Germany and somebody knocks on the door and you're hiding Jews. And they say, are there any Jews here? Right? You're gonna say there's Jews there? And he and he
It's like,
says the
wow,
most Jordan
yeah, yeah, whatever his
he
Kermit the
says the
Frog
most
voice.
Jordan Peterson thing he possibly could say. All right. And to be fair, I love old school college professor Jordan Peterson is one of my favorite people of all time. But sometimes he can be hilariously ridiculous. And in this instance he was. And he said, I would never live a life that would have led to me being in that position. And once again, he's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
making a meta statement about, he wouldn't put himself in a position to have to deal with that kind of stuff. But what the other person hears is, I would have stopped Nazi Germany. You know what I mean? That's not what
yeah.
he meant, but it sounded ridiculous. So then he says, so you're saying that you would stop Nazi Germany or whatever. And then Jordan says, no, I'm saying I would never end up in that predicament. And they just talk past each other a couple times. And then it ends up in another example where he says, somebody is holding a gun to your wife's head and they're going to pull the trigger if you tell the truth. Are you going to tell the truth? And Jordan says, I would never put myself in a position where that would be the outcome. And so the guy feels like
Yeah,
he's just dodging his imaginary scenarios, but the reality is he can't engage with these imaginary scenarios because he doesn't live his life in a way that allows him to even think about these imaginary scenarios.
which is, I mean, again, it's because like you're saying, like, yeah, on a metadata, and a if all society, all humans, for 99.999% of the time told the truth, probably everything would be better, right? Um, Maybe not like invention of lying, where it's like you don't have a filter, where it's like you just
Yeah, yeah.
say like, "Hey, I think you're ugly today," across the room. Like, but in general, you don't deceive, but you kind of paint yourself into a corner when you don't acknowledge that there's exceptions. Because of course, you don't even need to go to Nazi Germany, right? You could come up with a million situations, a million, I say, as he stalls to think of one. Whereas I don't know, there's a school
No.
shooters. Like, which room are the kids in? Like, they're in room 20B, 203B. Is like, well, yeah, don't tell the actual truth. That
Yeah.
lies. Like, the kids are actually at the police station. Make up a lie. I don't know.
Yeah,
So
and
obviously, lying could be a morally good,
and
of
there's and
course.
there's even logical ways to get around it, but the point is that when you're in an ideological war and you feel that the other person is going to be so in bad faith that you can't even move your position and give up a single inch, right? Without them trying to uncrumble. It ruins the purpose of the conversation because you can't have an honest conversation when there's no trust. So really, what he should have said is, well, yes, I would not say there was Jews upstairs in Nazi Germany, right? And I live my life in a way where I try not to put myself into positions where I would have to lie to do something, but I understand sometimes those things happen. And then the other person would 100% have attacked him as they were throughout this thing and try to say, well, see, you don't believe we should always tell the truth. And it's like, well, at this point, you're completely missing the point of why telling the truth is a better strategy than lying. Like, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, it's like, again, like, I like the phrase, but it's like you make exceptions for the exceptions. The rule is you always tell the truth. And the crazy situation that comes up once every 10,000 years or once every 100 years when someone's got, a gun to your wife and is asking you if you believe in God, just tell them what they want to hear, man. Like, no shit, Sherlock. But like in general, you don't live a life that would lead to those situations, and you want people to tell the truth. Duh, right? Like, that just makes sense. So also, like, that's why I'm so happy I didn't watch it. It's one guy who's like, he's so dug in where I feel like he can't even be fully honest with himself because he knows that they're gonna just take any inch and use it to try to break apart his entire identity. And maybe he stated something a little bit too strong, and they are just being as bad faith as they can to try to be like, they're asking is 2 plus 2 4, and once you say 4, they're gonna be like, well, if it's actually 4, then you're a dipshit. It's like they're gonna use this to
Then
like
you're
try
stupid.
to dismantle everything. You're not actually having to trying to be productive conversation. You're trying to win a couple gotcha points.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's one of the problems with the idea of winning an argument is like winning an argument is at the cost of the truth of whatever exists, right? So it's like it's not even a beneficial
I
strategy unless you're trying to make money off of clicks, and then well, obviously that's a beneficial
I
strategy.
cannot tell you how much I like old Jordan Peterson. And I don't like, maybe he's still a great guy now in all these different ways and stuff. I'm sure he's got his faults, but like I remember so clearly when I was listening to some Jordan Peterson thing when he was coming up, and he's like you don't win arguments with your spouse. Don't try to win arguments, because then if you win, then you're a loser. And who wants to date a loser, right? It's like this very simple concept. Like, yeah, no shit. You don't want to date someone that's always a look at this loser. They're always losing all these arguments. Like they're not happy, you're not happy. It's like that's not. You're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to resolve an argument. You're trying to figure out what the problem is and address it. Um, so just that like there's actually like 100 things like on that level that I thought was like super insightful and like helped me just be a better person, that I kind of wish that was still what I felt like I was getting when I heard him speak. Now I just feel like that those are things he's just covered, and now they're not really talked about that much anymore. Now it feels very ideological or super philosophical or super uh political, not as much like here's like real human nature in a very practical sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, audience capture is a real thing, and when you get into political and ideological wars that are completely in bad faith, and you have people attacking you all the time, it just changes the way that you talk and act. And it's one of those blessings where it's like we're not in a position where we ever really have to worry about that. If people come on here and in bad faith and they comment or whatever, then it's like good for them. We don't really have to worry about that. But when you have 40,000 people tweeting at you, you know what I mean, telling you to, do bad things or whatever, it's like that's tough.
Audience capture Israel. Do you think I would Israel, Palestine? He said it. Audience capture is a real thing. Do you think I would be playing only gotcha games on my YouTube channel if it wasn't for the fact that I thought that's what people want to watch? Even like I feel like audience capture gets a little too extrapolated. Like, oh, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, right? They've cultivated this audience and they're in an echo chamber of their audience. I think it does go way, way smaller than people generally think of the idea, like of just you and your friend group, right? Like you don't want to drink this beer, but everyone's drinking beer. It's like, is that an audience capture? Maybe you're not literally financially dependent on them, but you're socially dependent on them. Like these are like it comes up to like peer pressure in a sense. So I feel like people feel like they escape it by making it just, oh, it's all those other really successful people. But even I feel it as a YouTube content creator, and I think other people can feel it in their own social circles as well. Maybe it evolves obviously as it grows in scale, but I think it's something that just always kind of be out for. Make sure you're doing what you're doing not because of what others around you are expecting of you, but of what you want to do.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right on. Like peer pressure and audience capture is the same mechanic, just scaled, right? It's like when it's your
Mhm.
peers, it's because it's a small group, right? And when it's audience capture, it's usually because there's some level of disconnection between you and the group. But even when I go to like work or whatever or conferences, like I know I'm expected to be the smart data guy, so do you think that's not the persona that I do my best to present so that people are satisfied with when they come to listen to me give a presentation? Of course I do, right? I don't want them to walk away
Of course.
being like, that guy was actually a waste of our time and he had no idea what he was talking about. But I also don't
Yeah,
want
just
to
have
tell them
Chat
anything.
GPT on screen. And just like, all right, Chat GPT, they want to know how many numbers goes into a million, and they're like, let's see what Chat GPT says about that, guys.
Yep,
That's not what they want. That's not what they expect. So, and in a sense, that's important. You're playing a role, um, and that's part of a societal. They expect you to fulfill a role, and so you play a part a little bit. Not that that part's alien to yourself, but it's an aspect of yourself turned up to,
exactly, right.
if it's normally at a 3, you turn it up to a 7 or an 8 or something like that, right?
Yeah, and it's something that I have to be careful with, and I think all of us do, right? Is when people want you to be a certain version of yourself that is an aspect about, just knowing when you are amplifying that aspect and making sure it still stays in continuity with who you want to be. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm not going to have to be at conferences or in meetings with, people across the country doing poverty data work all the time. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I need to make sure I can still shut that off while dealing with normal stuff at work with the normal people I work with. So they're not like, why is Josh talking like this today? He's talking like he's giving a conference. Like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's honestly, I think we'll find another new topic to talk about. We should wrap it up. We've I think we both got lives we got to go live on this. So I don't want to comment on that because I'll comment something, you'll comment something.
No, you're absolutely right. The last thing I'm going to leave with as a little tidbit for the last minute and a half that we have is when Jordan wouldn't just tell the people that it was the wrong thing to do in that situation. He could have explained it. Now I'm not saying why he did this, didn't do this or whatever, but it's like lying to a bad actor is not the same as lying to a good actor, right? So if you're dealing with people in good faith, right, that are autonomous and are trying to work with you in a reasonable way, then the best strategy is to not lie to them. When somebody's purposely going to twist your words and take advantage of you, that is not the same situation, right? And I don't think it's fair to pretend like that's the same situation.
Well, and I think that's why Sam Harris and him have had pretty reasonable conversations where maybe they don't accomplish a whole lot, but at least they can like try to really pick each other's brains versus like Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins. Not that Richard Dawkins is a bad actor or anything, but it's like I feel like their conversations just did not get anywhere, right? It was just like what color is this? Richard Dawkins says this is orange, and he's like, the human perception would see this as orange. It's like, yeah, but just say it's orange. It's like, yeah, but the human eyes, what is your orange, my orange? I feel that's kind of what I felt like. So, but no, you're absolutely right. If someone is trying to, you could be a lot more open and experimental and willing to cede ground if someone is trying to really understand you. Because, and it maybe it's not ceding ground. Maybe you just overstated something. Maybe you used too strong of language and you really didn't quite mean it that way because it was just human nature to talk in maybe in a slightly imprecise way. You're like, okay, I didn't mean like literally never lie under any circumstance. I mean, as a societal rule, lying should be taboo, but there are situations where the greater good would clearly benefit to lie and it would be the moral decision to.
That's right. And so I hope everybody enjoys our first Philosophy.exe podcast. We'll catch you guys next
Absolutely.
time.
Just in part 2 of the 10 questions for life.